Hello, everybody. This is Jonathan Lack, host of the Weekly Stuff podcast. And before Sean Chapman and I started doing this show regularly in 2012, we actually had a different podcast called The Monthly 10, which was an extension of my blog at the Denver Post's Your Hub at the time. Now, this was way back when we were still in high school, and we're still very much learning the ropes of podcasting and, life. These episodes are not available online anymore, and as long as I am alive, most of them will not be. But there are a couple that connect to various topics we've covered over the years, like Doctor Who, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Ones we've even referenced a couple of times on the show, especially in Doctor Who conversations. And I am taking those episodes out of the vault, dusting them off, and presenting them here on our YouTube channel to fill out and complete some of our playlists. The audio quality isn't great. The people you're about to listen to are not experts about anything at all, but it might be worth some fun. You'll see. This is the Weekly Stuff from the Vault. Hello and welcome to the Monthly 10 for October 2011. I am Jonathan Lack from JonathanLack.com, and with me is resident Doctor Who expert Sean Chapman.
Hello, folks.
I think we could just sit here and listen to this music all day.
But I don't think that would be a particularly productive podcast.
It would also be a copyright infringing podcast, and that's more scary to me.
Yes.
All right. If you couldn't tell from that opening, we are talking about Doctor Who this month.
Doctor Who! If you've seen the finale, you'll get that.
And we will talk about that soon. But yes, we are talking about Doctor Who, specifically Series 6. If you will remember, back in April...
Season 32, you mean?
Yes, when Season 32 of Doctor Who, Series 6, for those of you who aren't familiar with the number of seasons this show has aired, Series 6 of the modern era, Season 32 overall. It started back in April, and Sean and I back then did a whole month of Doctor Who podcasts.
Doctor Who?
Doctor Who podcasts, and we went through all the Doctors, picked the best serial from their era, and talked about that, and it was a extremely exhaustive podcast, probably more than anyone should devote to a single subject in a month, but, that's what we do.
But if you're going to devote it to one subject, Doctor Who is the subject.
Yes. Well, because I don't think there's any other pop culture thing that's that rich and accessible.
And long.
Yes. Right.
Very long.
I was thinking, Star Wars, we did that last month. There's all the expanded universe you could get into, but that's not as accessible. And even then, Star Wars didn't start in 1963.
Yeah.
So, anyway, back in April, we were celebrating the beginning of Series 6. Series 6 is now over, so we decided to come back and revisit the series and just talk about what are our final thoughts on it, what were the best episodes, weakest parts, overall impressions on it. We're going to go episode by episode and explain our favorite bits and pieces of it. If you remember on yourhub.com and now on jonathanlack.com, sometimes when a TV season ends and I've been blogging it, I'll usually do a final post called the Farewell Season X Extravaganza and talk about all the episodes and my favorite characters and moments from the season. And that's basically what we're doing here in podcast form, though.
Okay.
With Doctor Who. And
Doctor Who!
Yes, are you going to say that every time we say Doctor Who today?
Doctor Who! Maybe. I don't know.
Okay. You got to have your head in a box.
And
Spoiler alert. Actually, we probably should mention that.
Spoilers.
Yeah. I don't think that would spoil anything yet, but there are spoilers on this podcast for Series 6. If you have Season 32. If you have not finished it yet, haven't gotten to the finale, haven't started it, come back and listen to this podcast when you're done. We're releasing this on Saturday, October 8th. So that's close enough to the 10th. We're going to just call this the Monthly 10 for October, even though it will have absolutely nothing to do with the concept of our show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will have no 10 lists at all, but, it's good to mix things up.
Yeah.
It's like an episode of Doctor Who where one week maybe they aren't in the TARDIS. Next week they're only in the TARDIS.
It's like 1 week they're in Roman times with Nero. The next week they're fighting the Daleks on some random planet.
Yeah. That is a show with lots of variation.
Yeah.
You cannot really accuse Doctor Who of getting too repetitive. That's one thing.
Well, other than maybe with the Daleks.
Yeah.
Every once in a while the Daleks show
no
up.
Daleks in season 32.
There's little.
But no Dalek episodes.
I'm just disappointed that they weren't able to break that not having a Dalek in. I mean, it's not the Dalek wasn't a focus or anything, but it's like, I just want, there has to be a season finale that does not have a Dalek in it. I just want one. Just one.
Okay. But overall, I think it was significant. This was the first season without any Dalek episodes.
Yeah.
And that was nice, because one of the things I really liked about this season was their exploration of new enemies and new areas and stuff. They didn't rely on old enemies and aliens and stuff. And that was
not that much.
Not that much, right. But even then, I think they used them sparingly if they were going to do it. So we'll get into that. We're going to start just by going through all 13 episodes, but we'll go story by story. So if there's a two-parter, we'll just tackle the whole thing at once. And just so happens, the season began with a two-parter, first time in the modern show's history. This was The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon. Sean, what were your thoughts on this premiere?
So if you may remember, if you listened to our Doctor Who Extravaganza, we did do a overview of when we watched the season premiere, The Impossible Astronaut.
Part one.
Yeah, at the very end of the last podcast, Doctor Who podcast we did, because we watched it together. And I think my impressions then are basically the same I feel now about The Impossible Astronaut specifically. I really liked that opening. I think it did a lot of really interesting stuff.
You can't not be excited for the season after seeing that. And it's a good story in its own right, too. It's not just hype. It
is. I think it was paced really well. That was some of Matt Smith's best stuff, was showing the difference between the Doctor, 200 years in his future, and the Doctor now. You could really tell the difference. You already suspected something was really different with the Doctor before you found out, he gets killed or whatever, and then the normal old, Doctor comes in.
Yeah.
I don't know how you classify
900-year-old versus 1100-year-old, I guess.
Even then, that's probably not accurate at all.
No. But yeah, Matt Smith, one of the things he did this year was impressing in the little moments as well as the big moments. And one of those little moments is when he's going to his death and he meets the astronaut, and it's just the little facial expression he makes, the few words he says. That is a beautifully acted scene, but it's so subtle, and they don't play that as a big, heroic death moment. It's just submission, and it's really good, especially when I think you link back around at the end of the season to see what his mindset was going into that, and that's kind of cool. But anyway, so that's The Impossible Astronaut. Now, you and I differ a little bit on our thoughts on Day of the Moon. Yes. You were less hot on that episode.
Yeah, I liked it more the first time I saw it, but I've rewatched a lot of the episodes from the season multiple times.
Me too.
Especially since it bridged that big gap, so there was a lot of time. And when I was rewatching Day of the Moon, I felt it was a lot more convoluted than it needed to be. It was jumping around time-wise a lot more than it needed to, especially how the Impossible Astronaut ends on that cliffhanger where Amy shoots the girl in the astronaut suit, which, River Song and all that stuff, whatever. But then it cuts. The Day of the Moon starts as 3 months later.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what the fuck's going on, and people are getting captured by Canton Everett Delaware III.
Yeah.
And you don't understand anything that's going on, and then you find out the Doctor's been captured in Area 51, but Canton Everett Delaware III is really working for them, and that they've been going around trying to find out stuff about the Silence, and then he has to fake kill them for some reason and bring them to this place where they're making a dwarf star alloy chamber for the Doctor so that none of the Silence can get in, where he's hidden the invisible TARDIS, which he never makes invisible again. But he did make it invisible in the Invasion, back in the second Doctor era. But you see, it's so convoluted, but it doesn't need to be at all, and I think it was written just to make the opening of that episode kind of confusing and really fast-paced. But when you actually stop and think about it, I don't think it worked that well. And the rest of the episode I like. It's just that part doesn't set it up well and is very unnecessary, and it takes 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
And it's kind of wasted time, I felt, in that episode.
I understand. I probably agree with those complaints. They don't bother me as much, I guess, because I do like the idea of them being out there 3 months investigating the Silence, because the way they set up the marks on the arms comes back so well at multiple intervals during the rest of that episode.
Like I said, I like that. It's just it was set up in such a contrived way. None of that stuff needed to happen. They don't even explain why he needs to go out, or Canton has to go out and try to kill them, only not kill them, and how they somehow are able to breathe in body bags when he's bringing them back to Area 51. It's just there are a lot of little plot holes in that. When you stop and think about it, I just think it could have been tightened up a lot more in the writing.
maybe it's because Arthur Darville's contract at that point had something that he had to die in every episode, and their idea there was that, why don't we have everybody die in this episode? So
only not die, but somehow still live in a airtight bag.
Yeah. So, yeah, but as a whole, I like Impossible Astronaut / Day of the Moon because, for one, the Silents are one of Stephen Moffat's best inventions.
Yeah, I do like the Silents.
I just think they're such a well thought out and then implemented villain because they kind of combine the Weeping Angel and the darkness from the library episode and all of Moffat's little, different creatures he's invented into one really, really super scary creature. And they're just very well used here. And I think the Doctor's whole trick to defeat them at the end is really ingenious.
Although, that's another part that is it's kind of funky with the Silent saying, shoot us, you should shoot us all on sight. It's that's a very specific fucking plan, Doctor.
Yeah, I know. That's one of his ones that's, his ego maybe got the better of him.
I don't know how that worked out.
Yeah. But, at the same time, the rest of the season was sort of an exploration of when the Doctor's ego doesn't pan out for him. So it's kind of interesting that you start with one that could have so easily gone horribly wrong.
Because, it was like a 1 in a million chance that the Silence would say that specific phrase.
Right. Now that is the part that rang false, but I like the final moment. You've got some good music there. It's good choreography. That was a brilliantly directed two-parter.
Yeah.
I believe that was Toby Haynes.
He was the same guy who did the finale from season 31. I know that.
Right, and like I said, I think that's Toby Haynes. I'm looking it up right now because he's good, and I wish he had directed more. And yes, it's Toby Haynes. He also did the Christmas special. I wish that was the last one he did this season. And while I wish he had done more, definitely the rest of the directors this season took his cues because this whole season looked very cinematic.
Yeah. And, the direction was really good this season, I agree with that. Right.
And so this one, they actually shot in Monument Valley, and they really made use of it. It wasn't just they went out to this location. They used it very well. Mm-hmm. And it's so much so that when you get back to it in the finale, you can tell they're on a green screen.
Yeah.
Really easy, because you can tell you know what it looks like when they are there, so when they're not there.
Yeah, I did notice that in that one scene.
Yeah, I bought an iTunes season pass of this season just so I could see those first 2 episodes in HD. And then the rest of the season looked great in HD too, but that stuff in Monument Valley in high def was really gorgeous. So, I like this premiere. I think it was both a good story and a good establishment for the rest of the season. My one thing, I think Impossible Astronaut was better paced.
Yeah,
it had character moments. There's that great speech River gives to Rory that colors everything we know about her the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. And how she feels about the Doctor and how their relationship both tortures her and exhilarates her. And Day of the Moon was so plotty, it didn't get into the character moments. But overall, it's hard to know what would the balance be when you have that much stuff to do in just 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I think Moffat did about as well as you could hope. It's not one of his classics, I would say.
Yeah, no.
But
especially not the Impossible Astronaut alone I really, really love that episode. I just don't think Day of the Moon concluded that very well.
Right.
That could have been done a lot better.
That is the sheer backwards of any two-parter from the Russell T. Davies
era.
No,
that's true. It's almost, even later, it's usually the first episode of the two-part is kind of like, it's all set up really for the second episode. Yeah, this one, it was all the setup was the best part. Yeah. Well, mostly because you had all the stuff with the Doctor dying, and so that was holy shit.
I can't, if you want to know what a reaction to that was like when it happened, just listen to our podcast from April. That blew my fucking mind that he would go there in the first 10 minutes of a season. It's crazy.
Yep.
So, all right, so that was Impossible Astronaut, Day of the Moon. The next one, Curse of the Black Spot, I think this is one that suffers both because it's a fairly weak episode of Doctor Who and because you don't place this episode after a 2-part premiere that exciting.
Yeah.
Doctor's Wife should have gone in this spot, because that would have kept momentum. This does not keep momentum. This is a totally throwaway hour, and I think it has merits. I just think it's also a very throwaway episode. Throwaway episodes can be fun. There are certain throwaway David Tennant episodes that I think are wonderfully zany. But, doing a throwaway episode after a hugely plot-based 2-parter, where you end with a little girl regenerating, is
I forgot about that. That's how Day of the Moon ends. And then they
good cliffhanger. But
pick that up 6 months later on the show.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Anyway.
That was like...
Yeah. Anyway, but what did you think of Curse of the Black Spot?
That's definitely my least favorite episode of the whole season. I just don't think it... I think it was a good idea. I just don't think there's just like, it didn't have like, it didn't pace right, it didn't feel exciting. Yeah. It's just, it kind of was dull to me.
Yes.
That's how it felt.
It is dull, and my problem with it, and I've rewatched it now, and it's the same problem I had the first time. If you're going to do an episode with pirates, make them pirates. These people were just kind of nice bearded men hanging out on a ship. That's not pirates. That's not fun in the way pirates should be fun, I think. Because when I hear a pitch for an episode of the Doctor going and hanging out with pirates and having an adventure on the high seas, there are a million different ways I think about that. The Doctor teaching a pirate to be a better father, that is the last thing I would ever imagine, and that little kid is not good, and he ruins parts of that episode for me. I like the resolution. I like the twist with the ghost. I think that was inventive. I like where it goes in the end. I like the stuff with Amy and Rory, even though Rory is dying once again.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. I like that last half, but also that last half is rushed because the first half does nothing.
Yeah.
So pacing is a big deal there. I do like, I forget the name of the performer who does Captain Avery.
Hugh Bonneville.
Yeah, I liked Hugh Bonneville in this. Again, I think the character could have been written with some sort of edge because Captain Avery was not a nice, wholesome guy. He's a fucking pirate.
Yeah.
There's a difference. And, other than that, there's problems. Matt Smith, again, elevates this episode more than he has any right to. Like the scenes where he's giving him the speeches about treasure and stuff, and it's like, I'm really into it in those moments, even though I'm like, wait, there's really nothing here on page. And Matt Smith is just bringing it up because he can, and that's what he does. So
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it's not a horrible episode. I mean, Doctor Who tends to not have horrible episodes. There's usually something of merit,
unless there's a blowjob slam.
Yeah, unless it's Love and Monsters, but that barely counts as a Doctor Who, regardless.
Doctor Who has to be in it more than 30 seconds.
Yeah, but this is just kind of like one of those average, kind of like Fear Her, and it was just dull. Is really my impression. I've only, I think, rewatched it once, and I've rewatched all the other episodes at least 3 times.
Right, Fear Her is a good comparison. Especially in...
I even like Fear Her more. Okay. Mostly because it felt like the X-Files to me.
Yeah. So. But both are... Where I mean that is they're both fairly dull episodes that are elevated by whoever's playing the Doctor in them. Mm-hmm. I probably actually liked this one a little bit more because Rose pissed me off so much at that point in Season 2. And here I think you have Amy fighting in a pirate outfit. That's fun on multiple levels. Yeah. So, that's all I got to say about that. We now reach an episode that... Would you say it's better than Curse of the Black Spot? The Doctor's Wife?
I think that might be the general consensus among fans, yes.
Okay, because I think this episode was fairly divisive. It was either you loved it, or you thought it was the greatest thing ever. There was a sharp divide there.
Yes. It's easily my favorite episode of the season.
I would say it was the best, yeah.
Yeah, it's The Doctor's Wife by Neil Gaiman, who's also probably my favorite contemporary author at the moment, so... That was kind of helpful. Yeah. Also, a guy who really understands Doctor Who. A guy who also, his favorite Doctor happens to be Patrick Troughton. So there you go.
Everyone involved with the show at this point loves
Patrick
Troughton.
Yeah, no, it's really true. Like, usually, like, it seems to be like Patrick Troughton is like the Whovians' Doctor. Like, if you've got, like, there's so many people involved with Doctor Who that when you hear interviews, it's like, Patrick Troughton was my favorite.
Yeah. Well, and I think we talked about this back in April. He struck me as my favorite, watching all 7 in succession of those 7. And most of that is just William Hartnell is so different from the other 10 people who have played the role. Mm-hmm. And I think Patrick Troughton, everyone copies him at least a little bit.
Yeah, he definitely defined the Doctor as he is now. And I do love William Hartnell. I think that's a really good setup for how the Doctor becomes the Doctor that he later is. But Patrick Troughton is really who carries that torch. Yeah, if Patrick Troughton had not taken on the role of the Doctor, Doctor Who would not have continued for as long as it has.
Right. I mean, and that was a crazy thing for an actor to do, to say, yes, I'll come in the 5th year of a TV show and pick up a role that people love. That's, that's a brave thing to do as an actor, and also to
Fourth
say,
year of the TV show.
okay, sorry, I just kind of threw out a random number, but you know, to come in and say that and say, and I'm also going to throw out most of his performance and start fresh.
Yeah,
and that's you know, we owe him a lot. So
but anyways,
Doctor's wife.
Yes. So, and you can tell he's a Patrick Troughton fan because the device for the very beginning of the episode starts with a throwback to the War Games, Patrick Troughton's last episode, where in that episode, Patrick Troughton, this is the first time you ever hear about Time Lords, and he has to send a message to the Time Lords to fix this whole crazy situation. It's a big 12-part serial. Way too hard to explain, but he makes a little psychic box and sends a message to the Time Lords. And that's how you send a message. That's the only time it's ever occurred. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in Doctor Who that's like that. But I really love... I mean, there have been a lot of really good callbacks to classic Doctor Who in this season that I've loved. And that was one of the really... like, just really subtle ones that, like, there's no reason that you need to know that.
I had no idea.
He just picks up on this one little thing from the War Games, and it's just like, I'm going to use that again.
And
just like a little throwback.
And what Sean's referring to is the Doctor's wife, if you don't remember, opens with the Doctor getting a message in this box. Yeah. And that's, as he's saying, from the Patrick Troughton War Games serial. And this leads him to a planet called House. Yes, I don't know if it's called House, but
it's like you have a soap bubble, and there's a little soap bubble on the edge, and you've got this little bubble universe. It's not like that, but if it helps it make sense to you, that's good.
That made me laugh so hard in the episode.
I love, like, just the writing in The Doctor's Wife is so good, because it jumps, it has some, like, fantastic dramatic moments, and then also some, like, just really, really funny dialogue.
Yeah.
And you can just tell that Neil Gaiman... I think he writes the Doctor's voice better than it. Just he's so clearly a huge Doctor Who fan. So much of the lines sound to me, at least, because if you listen to the other Doctor Who podcasts, I've watched all the shows, so I know all the Doctors really well. And all of the lines he writes, you can hear in your head all the other actors performing that line, and it's all in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
But you can hear all the other Doctors delivering that line, and it's just really...
And I
really
thought,
interesting as a Doctor Who fan.
And I agree. I think also, though, the way it modulates between humor and drama is something Matt Smith, that's one of his key talents as the 11th Doctor. And so this is almost, he's probably one of the better Doctors suited to really hit this home, where he can deliver that hilarious soap bubble thing. And then at the end of the episode, he'd be in tears, which we've never seen him do. And
definitely, I think this has been some of the best dramatic stuff that, I mean, even before that, when he opens up, like, for the episode, they land on the planet House, and how the House is basically trying to he eats TARDISes, he's like a life form, and so he sucks the TARDIS out, the life of the TARDIS out of the TARDIS, and into a human form, Idris.
Yeah. And
so that's kind of the setup for the episode.
That the Doctor gets to talk to his TARDIS for the first time.
And he draws him there with those psychic messages, and since he's been killing Time Lords for who knows how long, there's like a little box with a whole bunch of these in them, and he opens it up. And I think that's one of the best dramatic moments, because because the Time Lords haven't been brought up a whole lot in the Moffat's era so far, and that did a lot with it.
Yes. And it's great, and that's one of those moments I totally see what you're talking about, where any Doctor could deliver that, because I can see different Doctors doing it different ways, where I feel Patrick Troughton would do it a lot the way Matt Smith does.
Yeah, he definitely would.
Tom Baker would be kind of subtle about it, you know. I think Christopher Eccleston would be really pissed off. David Tennant would yell really loudly, that kind of thing. And but it's a great moment, and Matt Smith's sort of subtle indignity there, and how angry he is, and it's great. But yeah, I think the central conceit of this episode that we haven't really touched upon yet, we just briefly brought up, is that the Doctor gets to talk to his TARDIS in a human form. And it's one of those things where, as a Doctor Who fan, you wonder, in 700 episodes, how did no one think of that yet? But then,
I mean, it's been done, like, a little bit in some audio dramas I've listened to, but never, like, went all the way.
Right.
So it's like, it's been touched upon a little bit, but they've never really
and I don't mean to say that as it's an unoriginal idea. I'm saying it's so blindingly original and brilliant. It's like, this is so clearly a good idea. How could no one have done this before? But then the important part is Neil Gaiman doesn't just rest on, hey, I've got this great idea. He really executes it perfectly. And just so many great moments. And I think all the dialogue where she's telling him, you know, I always took you where you needed to go, even, you know, and he says, you never took me where I wanted to go.
Yes.
But I took you where you needed to go. And things like that, those exchanges are so great. Do you remember the name of the woman who plays Idris?
I can't remember it at the moment. No.
Okay, but she was really good.
She was phenomenal. I think another thing is there's so many. I mean, Moffat does this in a lot of his episodes too, but there are a lot of really great like little ideas that they don't even do that much with. They're just there. Yep. You have the name.
Saran Jones played Idris. She was really good. And if we're going through the other actors in this episode, the guests, Michael Sheen voicing House. Wonderful.
Yeah,
I don't know where they thought of Michael Sheen for that, because he's known for maybe a quieter kind of voice, but he was really good here.
Yeah, he was really menacing.
Yeah, and that House actually mostly interacts with Amy and Rory in this episode, and I love how Neil Gaiman found room for a good Amy-Rory story in here, especially because for the first time in the modern era, we see the interior of the TARDIS, and that's awesome, and I hope they use those sets again, because they did not look cheap. They looked expensive as hell. And in fact, this whole episode, Neil Gaiman has that great story where he says,
originally the episode was going to be at the end of season 31, but if you watch the episode, you can tell, he writes so much great stuff, it's so imaginative that it costs so much money.
Yeah.
And if you watch the Doctor Who Confidential from the episode, he talks a lot it's probably my favorite Doctor Who Confidential I've seen, because it talks a lot about the process of making the episode and the writing process for Neil Gaiman. But he talks about how it was going to be at the end of season 31, but he ran out of money, so they're like, well, okay, we're going to make the lodger, and we can just shoot that in a flat down the street.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay. But we're going to make your episode. We're going to put it at the beginning of the next season. And so Neil Gaiman says, okay, so then what they did is they took all the other episodes back behind the house, beat them up and took their lunch money, and gave it to my episode.
Yep. It was visually the most impressive hour.
Yeah, just because you got with House, I love the scene where the House takes the TARDIS and Amy and Roy are in the TARDIS and flies away. So the Doctor and Idris are stuck on the planet with this basically just a shell because House is left. And then they realize that this junkyard they're standing in isn't a junkyard; it's a TARDIS graveyard because they have the chameleon circuit.
Yeah.
So it's and it's just shot so well. It's so visual and so rich.
And this was Richard Clark directing, who is also really good. He's done some other good ones this year. He did Night Terrors, which I didn't love that episode. I thought it was well directed.
All the episodes this year have been very well directed.
Yeah. So, good work by him. Is it a stretch to say this is the most visually impressive hour of Doctor Who ever?
I would probably say that, yeah.
Yeah. I know that's unfair with the classic series.
They couldn't have done anything close. Not even they could get 1% of the production value that has gone into this episode. But
and I love you get not only do you see the interior of the TARDIS, the hallways and stuff, you get a cameo appearance by David Tennant's TARDIS set, which is nice.
Which apparently they kept that. They kept that there. They kept that set for so long because Neil Gaiman wrote it into his episode.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I just thought they kept it for history or something.
No, that's why they kept the set. Yeah. So it's you have the season 31 box set.
There's a great scene where Matt Smith and Karen Gillan are hanging out in there having lunch.
Yeah, they're just sitting in the old TARDIS set, and then I thought when I saw those extras, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. They're keeping the old set.
You can also tell
they're keeping that for Neil Gaiman because he wrote that episode.
Well, because I know they'd been planning it before. I mean, Stephen Moffat and him had been talking about this since before he took over.
Yeah.
So it's so much planning went into it, and just the amount you can do in 45 minutes here is wild.
Yeah, it's insane. There's so much. I mean, they've got the patchwork people on House. It's just a weird little idea that's just kind of there.
Yeah.
And
you get an Ood.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
The Ood comes back
as nephew.
Yeah, and then you've got all the really great stuff with Amy and Rory where House is just kind of fucking with them.
Yeah.
And if you hear Neil Gaiman talk about the episode, you can know there's a lot more stuff he wanted to have in there specifically with Amy and Rory. And he said he's thinking about writing a novelization of the episodes. If he does that, I'm picking it up day one.
Yes,
that sounds
I will be
amazing.
reading that. I will be if I have classes that day, I will be skipping them to read the book. That will be awesome. So yeah, great episode.
Then we kind of only touched on probably the best moment of the dramatic moment of the entire season, maybe the entire New Who, is when
he says goodbye.
Yeah. And Idris is dying because you can't have the TARDIS can't live in that body, so it's transferring back into the console room. And just they have that last conversation, Matt Smith's like, I don't want you to go, and he just completely, like, the Doctor has never broken down this much before. And it's just...
And this is the only scenario where I could ever imagine him breaking down that much. And, you know, he says goodbye, and then there's a great moment at the very end when he, like a little child, he says, "Can you hear me?" to the console.
And then like, the lever slowly turns.
Yep. I teared up during this episode.
This is like one of the few ones I've teared up at. And then also, we forgot about probably the greatest joke in the history of Doctor Who is when it's at the end of the episode and the Doctor's kind of fiddling around in the TARDIS control room, and all the TARDIS has gotten really messed up from House, and so Amy and Rory's bedroom has been ejected from the TARDIS, and so they come down and ask him, can you get me another room? And the Doctor's, and then they say, and can you not put in bunk beds this time? And the Doctor's like, why not? It's a bed with a ladder. What's cooler than that?
I know. I love that. I have slept in a bunk bed most of my life, and that joke, I rewound it and watched it again. I was like, this is great.
It's the weirdest fucking thing, but it seems so much like what the Doctor would say. I think the bunk bed would be so cool because it's a bed with a ladder.
Yeah. What I love is that he's specifically doing that to Amy and Rory as a married couple. That he's having them with all the rooms in the TARDIS. He puts them in the one with the bunk beds because that's what he would do.
Yeah, and he's like, it's like you could tell he's trying to be so like it's just like one of the aspects of like the Matt Smith Doctor specifically, in kind of like a more classic Doctor approach where he doesn't really get human like romance and affection, where you wouldn't even think about like that. It's just like he's like giving them a gift.
Yeah.
It's like, you would love a bunk bed. It's a bed with a ladder.
He really
Why wouldn't you love it?
He's insulted when they don't want it. It hurts him. So, man, we could do the Doctor's Wife podcast if we wanted to.
Such a great episode.
But we're going to go on to one I also really loved, and that's the two-parter Rebel Flesh / The Almost People. The first part, when I first saw it, I was really cold on.
Yeah.
And
I remember you didn't like it, and I told you just wait.
Well, and that made me kind of rethink my strategy towards reviewing two-parters, because I feel like there is no fucking point to writing about part one of a mid-run two-part. If Moffat were to write it, I would write about part one. When it's anyone else, it's kind of like, I know they're going to be setting things up, and when I rewatched the two parts together, which don't watch these two separately, they go together, I really liked it, because I think the first one does a good enough job with pacing, setting up things, that part two has better payoff because of it.
Yeah.
And just briefly establishing what this story is about, it's the Doctor, as we learn over the course of the episode, he's figured out that Amy is a ganger on his ship. And so he is going to investigate basically the birth of the gangers, an early version of them, to see if he can figure out how to block the signal to Amy. You don't find this out until the very end of part two.
Yeah.
But that's why he's here in this factory where they're basically getting out. Is it oil or something?
It's like this acidic. I think it's like an acidic fluid basically that they're using as fuel.
It's a fuel source that kills.
Yes.
And the people at this mine, they use gangers, which are doppelgangers made of this synthetic life form called the flesh, and they use this to mine the fuel, whatever the fuck it is, the acid. And so they, obviously the people here, it's a story about humanity.
Yeah.
And it's about the people at this base. They don't consider the gangers people. They're kind of abusive to their gangers. And then a lightning storm strikes, which is a sequence that has to be a reference to Tom Baker's death when he's like climbing up in a light storm. They did that with David Tennant in an episode too.
No, that's not how Tom Baker's. There's no lightning storm.
Oh, isn't he climbing? Okay, maybe
he's climbing and he
the
falls.
Lightning storm. Yeah.
I took it as a reference to Frankenstein. I thought that was pretty obviously a Frankenstein type thing.
Okay, sorry.
It's alive! I wish the Doctor had said that.
That would have been awesome. He could have pulled that off. Anyway, but there's a lightning storm. It animates the flesh in a different way than normal, where they have their own consciousnesses, but they are literally the people.
You did a fantastic job pronouncing consciousnesses.
I hate that fucking word. Do you have any words that you hate saying because you can't do it?
No.
Okay. You have a better grasp on the English language?
Apparently.
Conscious, okay. They become intelligent and individualistic. Okay. The point is, there's gangers, and then there's the people they're the almost people, and there's the gangers and the people they're based on, and they both have pretty much equal right to call themselves.
Except for they look like Voldemort.
That's actually a good comparison. But fantastic makeup work.
Yeah, no, I do like the
Fucking
makeup
great.
work in this episode. It's
Yeah. And
pretty good.
And it's a story that sort of relies on you getting to know the guest stars and liking them. I think the second part does that better than the first, and that is a kind of crucial thing. But I really like this story. I like how the Doctor fights so hard to try to get these people to work together and have, the gangers and the humans live in harmony. And I whenever the Doctor has to become indignant on the behalf of a species, it's going to be dramatic.
Yeah, it's
gold.
got kind of like a Silurian feel.
Yeah.
They were like, I do love that when the Doctor doesn't side with the humans all the time.
That's great. And I especially love part 2 because you have the 2 Doctors set up, and this is one of Matt Smith's finest hours where he's playing basically the Doctor twice, but with enough subtle differences that he can have this fantastic interplay that is hilarious. And Karen Gillan gets some really good material where she is really mean to the Ganger Doctor, who turns out to be the real Doctor, little switch at the end, but where she's got this sort of moral dilemma where this is her best friend, but this isn't the real version, and she's very, distrusting of him. And I think there's a really great story there, a good message about sort of the essence of humanity, if you want to call it that. The very end of the episode has 2 little cop-outs I don't so much like. One where one of the gangers, Jennifer, becomes a giant monster.
Oh, yeah.
What the fuck was that about?
It looked like something from like a video game from Dead Space or Gears of War.
Right.
It's like, bro.
That's one of the few production aspects of season 32 that did not look good.
Yeah.
Everything else, the CGI was pretty solid.
There have been a few little CGI hiccups, and that's probably one of the bigger ones, because it was on the screen for longer than the others.
And my problem with that, though, is conceptually it's just a dumb idea.
Yeah.
That's all. But then also, I think it's a little bit of a cop-out that, at the end, only one version of each person is still alive. And but if there really was going to be harmony, shouldn't there have to be 2 of them to work this out? Because now there's no problem.
Yeah,
no one would ever know if they just went out and lived their lives again. So, and there's one of the people is a father, and he has a little kid.
Oh God! I forgot about the kid.
How can you forget about that kid?
Why? I blocked it out of my memory.
Yeah.
It is one of. I mean, we listened to the Star Wars podcast, we talked about Jake Lloyd. This kid's that bad. This kid's like Jake Lloyd level. My God, is he awful.
And he's playing with his shirt, and it's... I wondered if the point of the character was that his kid had a disability or something for a little bit, but then I realized that wasn't the point.
Yeah, and he's just the kid couldn't... It's not his fault, he's just a kid. Yeah. But he's just a kid, he's not a child actor. It was so awkward watching... It was like watching if you have ever seen someone making a home movie or whatever, or just recording some stuff with their 5-year-old kid, and how a 5-year-old kid just kind of acts really awkward on camera because he feels like he's being watched. Yeah. That's exactly how he behaves.
Yep. And it's kind of sad that that's one of the things that sticks out about the episode, because otherwise I do love...
I forgot about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's only there for...
Oh, it's only a minute. It doesn't...
but it is a pretty important scene.
Yes.
It's probably one of the most important scenes.
It's an emotional beat that doesn't hit home because you're laughing at it. And
but
that's too bad.
It's supposed to kind of be a big turning point for the gangers, not attacking the humans.
Right.
But then...
But what did you think of this 2-parter?
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought, once again, it was a really good throwback. It felt like an old school Doctor Who episode, because they're all basically in one place, and that's old school Doctor Who. It's you've got basically 5 sets for an episode, so it's you're basically in one general area for the entire episode.
Again, making good use of space was something this season did well, and director Julian Simpson on this one, great use of very limited space.
Yeah. And then also, another really good throwback to old school Doctor Who was at the beginning of the second part, you've got with the Ganger Doctors, once he's being formed, he's having to deal with his past generations.
That's a great scene.
Yeah. And so he's running through some old lines. I know he does the Tom Baker, "Would you like a jelly, baby?"
Yes.
Which is actually, I found out it was a new, Tom Baker re-recorded that line. Because he's doing work for audio dramas now. So they had him re-record the "Would you like a jelly, baby?" so they could get it really clean, didn't have to pull it from an episode.
Yeah.
I think he does a David Tennant line also.
Yeah.
Do you remember if there's another one?
He mentions cybermats. But that's not tied to a specific doctor. He's just talking about cybermats.
Yeah, I think there might be another... This is one of the ones I haven't rewatched recently, but I think he has another reference to something very old, but I don't
Let's,
specifically remember.
I'm on Wikipedia. They might say it. While struggling with his past regenerations, the Doctor's Ganger alludes to several previous Doctor's words. He misquotes the first Doctor's line, "One day we shall get back, yes, one day, from an unearthly child, as one day we will get back," speaks the third Doctor...
Reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. That's the one I was thinking of, because that's the third Doctor's kind of catchphrase, even though he doesn't say the full phrase that much.
Yeah.
The third Doctor, if you watched his era, is always running around reversing the polarity of shit. All the fucking time. That's like, apparently John Pertwee just didn't like doing technobabble, and that was one of the ones he liked saying, so they're like, fuck it, he's reversing the polarity of whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah, that's nice. But this was written by Matthew Graham, who when I saw his name on it, I was like, this isn't going to be good. He did Fear Her. This is a massive step up from Fear Her.
Yeah, it's way better than Fear Her.
Because, and to me, why I like it, and this is what I like out of Doctor Who, is where they tell a good sci-fi story and have a message or something substantive to it, both with their guest characters and with the main cast. They have a good Amy story here, some good character development for Rory, just kind of showing his, bravery and purity, and then obviously the Doctor gets a million great moments, and there's the cliffhanger ending, which is
the best cliffhanger they had this entire season.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this season was very cliffhanger-y. This one was the best.
It was batshit insane, and nobody saw it coming.
Yeah, nobody saw it coming.
No,
And then I like, it's not like the River Song baby, or not baby, like Little Girl Regenerating, where they never pick it up. It's like they immediately pick it up, which is very nice. Yes. They don't just kind of leave that cliffhanger.
That would be a hard one to leave hanging.
Yeah.
I think, like, the next episode, like, Rory and the Doctor are hanging out on, a beach, and Rory's like, "What happened to my wife?" And the Doctor's like, "We'll get back to it later. We're going to have an adventure."
Nice Doctor Who voice, by the way.
That was, since I know...
It was like a really weird, kind of generic British accent.
Since I know I can't do any Doctor as an impression, I went for generic British.
This is kind of generic. I did kind of wish that they had a just the Doctor and Rory episode. Like,
that would have been fun.
I really wish. I mean, they the Girl Who Waited had that a lot more. I just wish there had been one.
Maybe in a future season they can have one where like Amy's taking care of the kid and Rory needs a break, and so he and the Doctor go like on just a bachelor adventure.
Yeah,
So Rory needs a break from Amy, and the Doctor needs a break from River, and they go have some guy time. And because I don't think either of them would be particularly good at guy time, and that would be a very funny. That's what closing time is, basically.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. So, anyway, good two-parter, batshit crazy ending that was awesome, and then we get into the mid-season finale, which at this point I was pretty solid on Series 6 because I think it builds to this finale really well, and that's A Good Man Goes to War, which I feel is an imperfect episode, but a very strong one.
Yeah, I like it.
I think it's got pacing issues in the first 15 minutes until the Doctor appears. From there, it is brilliant. It's one of the best things Moffat has written in that last half, I feel.
Even though it's in the first half?
What?
Even though it's in the first half? You said the last half.
No, I think the last half.
Oh, the last half. I thought you meant like the last half of the season.
No, episode.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. Last half, I think the first half of the episode, like I said, the Doctor doesn't appear until the 17-minute mark. I feel that pushed it too far with the amount of hype they build to that. And it's okay. I really love Dorium, the blue guy, as a character. There's fun stuff with him. The Sontaran, who is a nurse, is the funniest thing they did this season, I feel. Doctor's line about the bunk bed was brilliant. Yeah. But the Sontaran asking Amy if
you can breastfeed, it's like no, you're Sontaran. Nonsense! I can produce plentiful amounts of lactic fluids.
Yes. It was such a great spin on who the Sontarans are and everything.
I just love because he's so enthusiastic about being he's as enthusiastic about being a nurse as a normal Sontaran is about just killing shit.
Yeah, it's great. But anyway, so you get all that stuff in the beginning.
You get the Silurian and her lesbian butler.
That would be an interesting episode to explore.
Yeah,
I wonder if they could...
I really want to know how the Doctor met the Silurian who's walking around in Victorian London eating Jack the Ripper with a lesbian butler, and she's got samurai swords and shit.
I want Moffat to write that episode next year because I know it will be as good, if not better, than Blink.
Because those two characters, it's they also get, I think, probably the least screen time out of all the little random side characters, and they're the most interesting.
Yeah, and I again the kind of assembling the team stuff in the first half I love. The stuff with the the monks the headless monks and the sort of Christian soldiers doesn't even
like
make a little bit of sense, and it's just weird. And that
they never explain
no.
what I think they're called. No, the clerics? Are they the
clerics? They're the clerics. And
they never explain the cleric stuff well.
What pisses me off is because in the fifth season episode or 31st season episode, where the time of the angels, that's where we meet the clerics, and they're the Doctor's buddies. Why are they trying to kill him now? That's my question.
Yeah, and there's because you don't have any reference to at what point in time it is for the clerics. You don't know.
But you do get Colonel Runaway, and he's the subject of one of the better scenes in the episode, which is where the Doctor, furious, calls him Colonel Runaway, and it's hard to explain if you haven't seen the episode. It's just it's very good.
I do like that. I don't like the speech as much as I think you do or a lot of people do on the internet, but it is a good one.
Yeah. Anyway, but once the Doctor appears, I think it's a really good story. I like the idea that he has this great victory where he wins the day totally non-violently, but then he was tricked and a lot of people die. And then you have the scene, which I feel is one of Matt Smith's best moments to date, where he is surveying the battle after he's lost, and he has to go, just a look on his face. You can see how much he's been bruised by this. And then he has to go comfort Lorna Bucket as she's dying and lie to her and say he knows her.
Yeah.
And you can tell how much it breaks his heart to tell her this and have to lie and that someone who loved him he didn't even know is dead because of him. And it's a great scene and sets up another wonderful moment where Alex Kingston appears as River and sort of gives him this speech, something he very much needs to hear at this moment about his reputation and his ego. And the Doctor, he believes what she's saying, but he doesn't want to, and he's kind of fighting back almost like a petulant child. And then you turn that around to she reveals that she's Amy's daughter, grown up, and just the look of joy on his face. Just Matt Smith in about 10 minutes plays every range of emotions you could do and does it spectacularly well. And I love the moment where he leaves in the TARDIS and he's so happy and leaves, and that's the moment we basically end this half of the season on. And that's a great sort of moment to end if we're going to be off the air for 2 months, I feel.
Yeah.
And you and I think, have slightly different thoughts about River as Melody Pond.
Yeah, I don't do you want me to start with mine?
Well, I'll just go first because I think it's simpler for me to explain. I like that. I like how much it ties Amy and Rory's story in with the Doctor's. I think it was predictable, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It was seeded before. They hinted at it. Whatever. They didn't hit us on the head with a sledgehammer with it or anything. I don't feel. I thought it was clever, if not the most unexpected thing, but they did the unexpected thing in the episode before with Amy being a ganger. I don't need them to have every episode be an unexpected ending. I thought this was a good emotional beat, good reveal of who River is. I like the whole revelation that, she is a sort of pseudo-Time Lord, that she's being used as a weapon against the Doctor. I think how they flesh out her mythology is good. And I just like how it connects all four of our main characters together. So I really liked it. I thought it was a good ending, good relation. It's what I thought was going to happen, and it's what I wanted to happen, and I liked it. So
okay, so mine kind of is, I think, one, like you're saying, is you don't need to have something unexpected, that it doesn't have to be a big twist. But they're building it, like they've been building up the River Song thing since season 30. Like, because she was with David Tennant in his last season. So they've been building that up for so long, and it's just kind of disappointing to have the revelation not be something directly tied to the Doctor. Like, the big thing is that she's Amy's daughter, and that's not directly tied to the Doctor.
I know it's not directly tied, but it's tied in the way that we spent. Season 31 is all about the relationship between the Doctor and Amy, and I think when you get it that close, having River be tied to what the Doctor did for these two people, Amy and Rory, I think that's ingenious. I like that. I think
it might be the difference between I've seen a lot more Doctor Who than you.
Okay.
So because it's like I still am expecting stuff to be a lot more Doctor centric, and they've done this a lot, and they kind of think they went a bit too far with it, with building up Amy so much. They do so much with Amy. A lot of the times it takes, I think, too much focus off the Doctor.
Okay. And I think it's still Doctor-centric in that what happens to River and everything only happens because the Doctor exists and because there are people who don't like him.
I mean, I like the aspect that she, like, all that stuff with her being, like, half Time Lord. I like that stuff. But that's not the twist. That's not the revelation. The revelation is, that she's Amy's daughter. And yeah, it also was kind of the default. It was the expected resolution to that, which is fine for a lot of situations. But when you've built it up across 3 years, basically.
Okay, but here's the thing.
You want something a little weightier.
Well, I thought it was weighty because they built it up for 3 years, but they also spent the entire first half of this season developing that so that when they get to that moment, it's not a twist. It's something that feels organic, and it did feel organic to me, and I like that they built into it. They devoted the Impossible Astronaut two-parter to seeding this idea. They continued it. They had a line in The Doctor's Wife about it. They had some stuff in the Rebel Flesh two-parter getting us in place for that. I felt it was organic. It fit with everything we know about River. I liked it, and I completely understand what you're saying.
It's just kind of like, instead of it being a wow moment, it was like an oh moment. Like, I kind of saw that coming. I was hoping for something more. Okay,
and I saw it coming, but I was happy because I was kind of, and I wrote this in my earlier reviews, I was kind of hoping that because I liked that as a concept. And I think in theory, you and I more or less agree on this episode. It's a strong episode.
Yeah, it's a strong. I think, and then also, I think one of my favorite little things about, like, the ending, like, I think probably one of my favorite parts about that whole episode is just the little thing the Doctor has he has his the carriage on the TARDIS.
Great.
Like, and then you don't quite know. He says it's his carriage, but like
I always thought it was his child's, because we know the Doctor had children at one point and they're dead. And
I think it might have originally been his, but that's like, it's like he's telling the truth, but he's not really telling the whole truth. It's like maybe the Doctor was left in that carriage when he was a baby, but really he used that later for, like, his child and maybe then Susan afterwards.
Right. And we know what happened to all of them, and it's sad. So, but he does that little pause when Amy asks him. So, but it's a great moment. Again, lots of nice throwbacks to Doctor Who lore, especially with all the creatures they bring in. And I feel like they're also seeding some little things that they could have fun with in the future, like the Silurian and her lesbian lover. That will be a great episode if they ever do that. The idea of the Gamma Forest, I would love to see that at some point.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like they were setting that up for next season.
Right. And I think those are good. That's the kind of establishment I like, where they leave it, where if they never revisited it, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
But it's there for them to revisit and enrich in the universe. So, good episode. And then we had the 2-month break, which was entirely justified by the narrative.
Of course it was.
Yes, because, and I will say this, I think would you agree, at the end of A Good Man Goes to War, that felt like a natural place to take a pause?
Yeah.
But then Let's Kill Hitler in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's like...
basically gives it the thing like, hey, you waited all summer, fuck you.
It's like you assume, like the second half of the season goes in a completely different direction than the one you expect. It's setting up something very different. It's setting up, like, okay, we're going to go off, you think it's going to be about finding...
Little River.
Yeah, Baby River, basically, and finding and, like, trying to do whatever it takes to, like, save her and all that stuff. And you think that's what it's going to be about. It's maybe kind of half a little bit what Let's Kill Hitler is about, but not quite.
Yeah, and I thought that too. And ultimately, I was very satisfied with the second half of the season, and I loved where it went. I think overall, I may have liked it even more. It didn't have anything as strong as The Doctor's Wife.
Yeah. I think personally, I would have... I mean, I don't know how it would have gone, but in my mind, I think the direction they were kind of leading into would have been a bit better.
Okay.
But because mostly because of, like, kind of my opinions on the season finale. But
okay. Anyway, but Let's Kill Hitler. What we're referring to here is that it starts.
Oh, by the way, worst fucking title of a Doctor Who episode ever, because it's not.
Explain this, because you have more stronger opinion.
Okay, so mainly my big opinion, the reason why I hate it so much is because they it's at the end of A Good Man Goes to War. You've got, I mean, I was really negative about the revelation of her being, it's like, I don't, like, hate that. I think there could have been a better revelation. I think they like, just handled it. They could have handled it better. I'm not saying, like, that's a bad story choice for her to be Amy's daughter.
Yeah.
So I came across, I think, a bit more negative about it than I meant to. But so I really loved the end of the episode. You know, the Doctor's going off. You get all that stuff. And then it pops up on the screen, to be continued, like, whatever the time was, like, next August or whatever, with Let's Kill Hitler. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
Really? No episode could live up to that audacity is the thing, and then they do an episode that has nothing to do
and
with
it's just,
that.
it's not a Doctor Who type. I mean, it's obviously not like a Doctor Who thing to do, because Let's Kill Hitler has nothing to do with the, I mean, it's a line that Mel says in the episode. Yeah. But it's like, they're not going to go kill Hitler. That's not the point of the episode. That has very little to do with the episode. They can still have the Hitler type thing in it, just don't make it the fucking title for the shock value. It's just kind of exploitative, and it's kind of just demeaning to the show as a whole. I
understand. But the episode itself is one of my favorites of the season. I would say maybe my third favorite behind The Doctor's Wife and one other where I may have a tie for number 2. But anyway, Let's Kill Hitler. When we're talking about the split and how this sort of betrays the idea of the split, is the first 5 minutes are Amy and Rory in a field, and it's a great opening to a second half of the season, where they're driving around trying to get the Doctor's attention, and then the Doctor comes out and he's like, "I've made no progress."
Yeah.
And they're like, "You've had all summer." And I'm like, what the fuck did you do? Why? Yeah, why did we have to wait 2 months if nothing happened in the middle? Because Sean and I were both assuming, perfectly naturally, I think, that they would use that jump for something to happen. Like, I thought we would come back, the Doctor would find River, and we would be into their sort of companionship or something.
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. He would come back with something. Instead, and then also, it's like, you've spent all summer, and it's like, well, one, you don't know how fucking long, like, the Doctor could have been, like, I suspect this a lot, like, as a fan thing in Doctor Who, that whenever you get a little break, whenever you get, like, a moment where the Doctor leaves in the TARDIS, and he doesn't have a companion with him, and, like, I think it's happened at least once or twice with all the other Doctors, in my mind, the Doctor's been gone for, like, 200 years by the time he gets back to you.
Which does happen later in the season.
Yeah. So it's like, he could have been, like, fucking across the galaxy doing whatever the fuck he was. It's like, oh, shit. I totally fucking forgot about that.
Yeah. Or I like the idea that he, that's like the first place he went.
Yeah, he immediately leaves and is like, I'm just gonna like pop back to Earth like right after the summer and be like, I'm sorry, I haven't discovered anything at all.
Yeah. Or he does that and he's bored like after 5 minutes because that's what he's just like, I need people with me, and he goes to the field and So anyway. After that, we meet Mel's, who turns out to be grown-up Melody Pond, who turns out to be River Song. The introduction of Mel's initially rubbed me wrong because it's introducing an important character who we've never seen before, who's apparently Amy and Rory's best friend. But I completely forgive that because it gives us the wonderful flashback showing Amy and Rory's childhood with Mel's, which I loved because I liked seeing, for one, young Amy played by... Caitlin Blackwood is so good. She's such a good little actress. And I love seeing her. And then when, them growing up as teenagers and the revelation that, I don't know if you call that a revelation, but that Amy thought Rory was gay for a long time. Just a funny moment and some sweet stuff in there. So I kind of forgave it because I think that flashback also is so self-aware that they're introducing a new character. Yeah. And that I ultimately smiled on it.
Yeah, I do really like the flashback. I still don't. That still does kind of rub me the wrong way. It just kind of feels cheap to me. It's like, now we're going to pull out Mellows out of nowhere that you. And if she had at least had like they're not even like her actually ever being on screen, but if there had been a reference to her once or twice.
Well, I think that would have been better. And I don't blame Moffat for not thinking that far ahead. Yeah. But it would have been cooler if, say, she was at their wedding or something. Yeah. And they could have introduced, like, the Doctor would be there and they'd be like, hey, this is our best friend Mel's. And the Doctor would be like, pleasure to meet you. And, and that's all you would need.
Yeah, just like something to tie it in. But again, coming out of nowhere just feels cheap.
But it is cheap, but I also like the self-awareness where they're very clearly joking about how cheap it is in that flashback. But anyway, Mel's, I like her kind of bombastic personality. And she's only on screen for a couple minutes because she gets shot and regenerates into...
Well, right now I need to... I definitely haven't told you about this, but this is in that little period where Mel's and the Doctor, and they're all on the TARDIS going to go in the past to kill Hitler. There's, like, one line. It is the greatest fucking throwback to classic Who in the history, because there's going to be, like, maybe 100 people on the planet that are going to fucking catch this. But it's this, like, one line about how... She shoots the gun in the TARDIS and like shoots the TARDIS. Yeah. And so the Doctor's like, "You shot my TARDIS!" And Mel says, "You told me that weapons don't work in here. That it's in a state of temporal grace." And that is the greatest fucking... I laughed so hard I had to pause the episode. It's a throwback to, I think it's the Invasion of Time. It's at least a Tom Baker episode where they can't use guns in the TARDIS, and the Doctor just pulls out of his ass is because the TARDIS exists in a state of temporal grace, so you can't use guns.
Yep.
It's like one of the big, like, there's like hundreds of these, but it's one of the continuity flubs in the history of Doctor Who where, of course, like, before that people had used guns in the TARDIS, afterwards people had used guns in the TARDIS. It's like, that was the only time. And so it's just this really great throwback to one little, like, continuity flub.
Yeah. It says here on Wikipedia that was an allusion to both, I lost it for a second. It's, never mind, it's gone now. Okay, it was there a second ago. Oh, Invasion of Time. Yeah, it was first alluded to during The Hand of Fear and demonstrated in the Invasion of Time. So those two serials. Yeah. So that's nice. That's awesome.
It's just like, that was so fucking funny when I heard that.
Temporal grace.
This is total bullshit.
Yeah. Let's Kill Hitler is full of continuity stuff. The Doctor on Wikipedia, the listing for continuity stuff for the episode is longer than the plot synopsis.
You get that a lot with Doctor Who.
Yeah, because this is
the show's been going on since 1963.
This is a very plotty episode, but it's one of the things Stephen Moffat does best, where he throws at you a ton of shit that could each be its own episode. Mm-hmm. But he puts it all in one episode, and that's brilliant, because you get an episode that's very rich. And I feel like it's busy, but not overly so. I feel it takes 50 minutes and tells a very fast-paced but well-paced story.
Yeah, I think this is one of the better-paced Moffat story episodes.
I think this was... It depends on... Do you count the Christmas specials as part of the season? Because
I count the specials kind of like off on their own.
Okay, I do too. Because I think A Christmas Carol was the best thing technically Moffat wrote this season, but I don't count it as part of it. It was in the production numbers of Series 6. But if you just count these 13, this is, I think, Stephen Moffat's best episode of the year.
Yeah.
I think it's the closest. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. I think Moffat had some problems with his writing this year that we'll get into, that I've alluded to in the past. But I think this was one where he comes very close to writing his own kind of classic. And it's a fairly straightforward story where River has come to kill the Doctor, and the Doctor basically is dying, and he is going to do whatever it takes to redeem her, though, to give her the life that she was robbed of. And show her that there's more to this, and try to get her back, you know? Mm-hmm. And it reminded me very much of the Caves of Androzani, in that, not in maybe the literal sense, but in the same sort of drive the Doctor has, where he knows that his time is limited, but he's going to do whatever it takes to do this one thing, and make his last actions matter. And even though we know the Doctor's not going to die in this episode, Matt Smith plays it so convincingly, and he has so many wonderful moments in this. It really works. It's a great story. And you have really imaginative stuff like the Tesselecta and There's other stuff, and I have not rewatched I have rewatched it, but it's been a while.
Yeah, and one of like the moments that I wish they had done. Like, this is like one of the big missed moments, and I entirely understand why they didn't do it, but it's like a classic Doctor Who throwback that they could have done that would have like made me cry. Like, I don't cry. This would have made me cry. There's a scene where, because the Doctor, he's been poisoned by River Song, and he's going into the TARDIS to try to find a cure.
That's a great scene.
Yeah, and so he asks the TARDIS, like, okay, holographic interface, and then it comes up with dude, does it come up
Rose
with?
Tyler.
Yeah, it comes up with Rose, and he's like, can you show me someone? It's like it comes with Rose. It's like, so show me someone else. It comes up with Marcia. Show me someone else. It comes up with Donna Noble. It's like, can you show me one person that I haven't screwed up? And I wish so hard that they had switched the hologram to Adric. Because Adric is, in the history of Doctor Who, he was a late 4th Doctor companion and then like the 5th Doctor's companion for, I think, the first season. And he's the only like full companion. There's one other character that's kind of half companion in First Doctor's stories that die, but she's introduced in a serial and dies in the same serial, so I don't really count it.
Yeah.
Adric was with the Doctor for at least a full season of episodes, across like kind of like bridge seasons. And so he was a full companion. He's the only full companion in the history of the show to have died. And if they had showed Adric, I would have cried.
That would have been the TARDIS kicking him in the
nuts. Would have been like the saddest fucking thing, because that's from fucking, like, 1983.
Yeah.
It's like, if you pull that out in an episode from 2011, it's like, holy fucking shit. And I know why they, like, it would have, like, thrown everyone for a loop. Like, probably, like, 80% of the viewer base don't even know who fucking Adric is.
Well, and I know the story of Adric, but I don't know what he looks like.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't recognize Adric, but it would have been the saddest. It would have been the saddest fucking thing I would have ever seen in my life. But no, it switches to little Amelia Pond, and that's good.
Because he hasn't, and the whole point here is that he hasn't ruined her life yet, but if he lets down her daughter, he's going to do it. And so he really wants to, and I just, that's a great scene. And I think, again, and we're starting to see this theme of Series 6, which is why I really love the back half of this season that's about the Doctor's guilt. Mm-hmm. And he's starting to develop this sort of self-hatred, and I feel it's a really fascinating direction to take the Doctor. And this episode sort of seeds that, but it's more focused on the big story and the revelations with River and stuff. And I think it's a really fun, it's a fun episode more than anything. It's one of those great Moffat puzzle episodes. Just good stuff all around. Great way to come back from a break, even though it doesn't really make sense that they had a break.
But it's a good episode.
The one practical thing I can see from the break, though, is that this would have been a hard episode to get away with mid-season.
Yeah.
It would feel too big if it were just episode 8.
Yeah, it does kind of give the episode room to breathe.
Yeah.
But it's still not fully justified. The break's still not fully justified.
Yeah. And the other thing, I was saying this to Sean earlier, this is technically classified in Doctor Who lore as a two-parter. Good Man Goes to War and Let's Kill Hitler. Why? Is it just because they're two adjacent episodes written by Stephen Moffat? They do not have the same story.
Yeah, and there's very little lead-in. Yeah. It's like you could have placed... Let's Kill Hitler didn't need to be right after Good Man. You could have had like a few episodes between them, and Let's Kill Hitler still would have made sense.
Yeah. So, oh well. But good episode. And then we come up on what's my least favorite of the season, but Sean enjoyed it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I liked it, but I mean, it's not a great episode, but I liked it more than Curse of the Black Spot.
This is Night Terrors, and I think the one thing you and I do agree with on this one is it's more of probably a throwaway.
Yeah, it's more of a throwaway episode.
And again, I think it suffers from the same... This isn't the episode's fault, this is the placement of the episode. Structurally, this is an odd one to put after Let's Kill Hitler, because momentum... I think you could have put this one maybe after Girl Who Waited, for instance, and you have... Momentum would be okay. But here, it's a strange spot for it. Same thing as Curse of the Black Spot. But tell me about Night Terrors, because
first of all, it was supposed to be placed like in the first half of the season, so... Yeah, I agree. The placement is totally fucking wrong.
Yeah.
But that doesn't bother me that much. Because, like, I don't even necessarily see this as literally taking place after Let's Kill Hitler. It doesn't have to because it's Doctor Who.
Right.
So, like, that's kind of how I look at it. So that doesn't bother me. But the episode is, I mean, it's very, very Doctor-centric. And it's basically the Doctor, Amy, and Rory all stop off. They get this little, like, psychic message, and they have no idea what the fuck it is. It's like, I think it's the only time the psychic papers come up this season.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he gets because I remember that surprised me because I haven't thought about the psychic paper in forever. But he gets a little message on a psychic paper, and he stops off in a flat in London, I think.
And what's kind of neat about this one, and I wrote this in my notes at the time, is Doctor Who had stayed away from any Earth-based stories this year.
Yeah,
basically.
This was very unearthy, and I enjoyed that.
But finally, this one
was... Well, was particularly not contemporary Earth, because Let's Kill Hitler's technically
right.
Earth, but it's,
what I meant
at least
is
it's historical.
Like, one of my complaints and Sean's complaints about the Russell T Davies era was they had this insistence on every other story taking place in 2010 or whatever year they were in.
Very annoying. Yeah. I mean, and it's also in the companions. It's like all the companions are contemporary. I really hope the next companion is not a contemporary human.
Right. But this one, but they hadn't done it in long enough that this one worked.
This one was okay, because... they hadn't really done it since.
They have a very self-aware line where the Doctor says, "I haven't made a house call in forever."
Yeah.
So
and basically the whole episode is really about the Doctor helping out this father who has this kid.
Yeah. And
the whole thing is basically it's a metaphor for having a child with like a mental disability or something like that, and the parent doesn't know how to handle it. But the kid in the sci-fi premise is that the kid is like this weird, like, changeling alien thing that's, like, it's a species that sends its, like, children across the...
They don't explain it particularly well.
I mean, it's not, like, the most solid sci-fi concept, but it works for what it is. It's, like... And the kid basically tries to integrate itself into whatever society it lands in. And when the child thinks that the parents don't love it because the kid acts basically like has a mental disability, because so there's something wrong with the alien, it's not quite integrating properly, and so the parents are really worried and they're really concerned, and they're trying very hard to figure out what's wrong with their child, like trying to get him help, trying to call a psychiatrist, and the whole thing is the kid overhears them trying to call such a psychiatrist, and he thinks that they don't love him, and so his psychic powers from his alien self go wacky.
Now, can I tell you what my problem with this episode is, just succinctly?
Yes.
Is that everything you just took 2 minutes to explain, they cram into about 15 seconds. And that, I fucking missed it. You had to explain it to me, because I'm fairly certain they also put on BBC America a commercial break within that 15-second exposition, and so that's why I missed it. But too fast. I wish they would have developed that, because then I would call this a good episode.
Yeah, I think
that's my problem.
I don't think Amy and Rory shouldn't have really been in the episode at all. Like they were in it for too long and they had nothing to do.
Right.
Because they should have just stayed on the TARDIS and maybe had one scene with them talking to each other on the TARDIS, and that would have been fine.
And I also think this is one where I almost wish BBC would let them have varying episode lengths, because 45 minutes was too long for this one in my mind. Especially because all the Amy Rory stuff was there to get them out to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
This would have been a great, half-length episode or something.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, the pacing on the episode. They needed to kind of balance how they handled a lot of the elements. They needed to explain the concept a little bit better. I caught it. I mean, I didn't watch it on BBC America, so I caught it better than you did.
Yeah.
So they needed more time to.
This was after that, though. I did not watch a single other episode on BBC America. I was done. Because they literally, this was one, they put a commercial in mid-sentence. I'm not kidding. They cut mid-sentence. Why would you do that?
They have to have commercials somewhere.
Yeah, but you could go to the end of the sentence.
Maybe they literally have to have it at a certain time interval.
Okay, well then, if that's the case, I suppose I forgive them. But Daniel Mays was good as the father.
Yeah, I liked the father in the episode. I think Matt Smith did a really good job.
Yes.
I just like this. It's a very doctor role where he's.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of. He pretends that he's basically a psychological professional, basically like a psychiatrist.
This is one where Matt Smith very much elevates the material. He's really good in this. And I actually think it's also good material for the Doctor, though. So, I did not like it overall, but, I'll watch Matt Smith in anything as the Doctor, and this is one where he really rewards you with that. Yeah. He does a great job.
I think one of the things that I still don't understand, I don't think they ever explained it, was... because one of the things is that the child, it projects its fears psychically.
Yeah.
And so, basically, it's the kid's, scared of basically everything. And his psychic powers magnify it, and these people get sucked into this dollhouse where his fears are. And inside the dollhouse are, these living dolls that turn other people into dolls. They never say that he's afraid of dolls, and since that's, the main... that's the main antagonist, or I don't want to say antagonist, but the main, villain or whatever, the monster of the episode. They never set it up.
Right.
And I thought maybe I missed it, so I rewatched, the first 5 minutes, because it seems like they could have set it up very easily at the very beginning. But instead, I noticed they set up that the kid is afraid of the elevator noise, which comes up once. And it's not, it's like a throwaway thing.
Yep.
They didn't need to set that up. The father explains it anyways. I didn't notice that they set that up, that they needed to set up the... that's one of the things that they really should have changed, was setting up the dolls and making the dolls more scary and more important.
Right.
Because it kind of felt like it was just thrown in there because some people are afraid of dolls and let's try to scare them.
Yep. Good production design on the dolls, I suppose.
Yeah.
Very middle run episode.
It's probably. I liked it more than you, but it's just right above Curse of the Black Spots. I didn't think it was boring at the very least.
Those two are fairly interchangeable for me. That's all.
I can see that.
So I called them in my reviews, actually of the finale, when I was kind of talking about the season as a whole, I called those two kind of the throwaways of the season, where I feel like everything else doesn't necessarily have to play into Moffat's grand story design, but has a place for the characters, or it's just a really good story or something where it feels of a piece with this season of TV. Mm-hmm. These two don't necessarily earn that. Yeah,
so, it's like they could really be. There's one or two in season tie-ins in both of them, but without those, it's they don't even need to be anywhere in the season. They could taking place anywhere.
Right. And as I noted in my review of Curse of the Black Spot, Stephen Moffat's run had a really long streak of nothing even, I would say, subpar. He had a really hot streak going.
Yeah.
And so, you know what? If they do 13 episodes and 2 are sort of duds but not bad, that's still a good streak. That's better than doing a season that has Love and Monsters, The Satan Pit, and Fear Her in it all in a row and made me want to, drive my eye out with a rusty fucking fork.
I think that might be a bit of an exaggeration.
Like
I said, there's no, other than maybe Love and Monsters, there's no horrible episode of Doctor Who, at least in my opinion. I mean, mileage may vary on classic Doctor Who, how you watch those episodes, but...
All right. Anyway, the next one is one that I really quite liked, which was The Girl Who Waited.
I like this one as well.
Yeah, this is a really good companion story. And it's also one that really taps into the theme of this season, which is sort of the Doctor's self-loathing and where that comes from. And I think this episode did a fantastic job on all those fronts. It's a story about Amy and Rory and the Doctor end up on this Appalachia, which I remember because the Doctor shouts it as the first word of the episode.
Appalachia.
And it's apparently a top holiday destination, but now there's a fatal plague called Chen 7 that affects beings with 2 hearts and can kill them within a day, which means that humans like Amy and Rory will be fine there. The plague won't hurt them, but the Doctor would be killed. But anyway, they end up in this hospital area, and Amy is mistaken for a patient, and she's taken in here. And basically what this hospital does is it gives people their last days of life in comfort, but also lets the families spend time with them. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to go in. It's hard to explain with words because it's a very visual concept, but it's one of those things I love to see in Doctor Who where they create this very three-dimensional world that could be the center of an episode.
It's more of like a four-dimensional world because they're playing with alternate timelines in it.
It is. But it's something that you could just center the episode around that concept, but instead it's just the setting. And I think that's really neat because it adds more weight to the episode. And then, but anyway, Amy ends up here and she ends up waiting 23 years before Rory catches up to her. Yeah. And so for Rory, this is also something, Stephen Moffat could have written this one, and I wouldn't have known any better, because it's a very Moffat-style concept, where Amy's waited 23 years, and Rory just appears, and so Amy's very mad at him and the Doctor. And it's a good exploration of the negative effects the Doctor can have on his companions when he's careless, the way his companions can react, and it's also just a great story about the love between Amy and Rory.
Yeah, it's the best Amy and Rory. The episode's about Amy and Rory. There's the Doctor does have some really good character stuff, but the crux of the episode's Amy and Rory's relationship and exploring that. Right,
and it's good because you've had previous episodes where Rory has to do something big for Amy. This is really the first one where she has to do something big for him. And that's actually one of my only complaints about the episode is the last half. I don't like that old Amy is so fucking selfish for so long. It drove me the wrong way only because you have that elephant in the room of Rory waiting 2,000 years for her.
Yeah, that I understand Amy's character makes I think she in that situation the way Amy is, she would be pretty selfish.
Yeah,
but yeah, definitely it's actually really interesting to go back to the Rebel Flesh. Those that two-parter. Yeah. Rory, Rory's experience is how with him being the last Centurion and all of that, waiting 1,000 years and guarding Amy. It was used tremendously well in a very subtle way in Rebel Flesh that they never bring it up.
Yeah.
But the way Rory acts towards the Rebel Flesh, the almost people, because he spent so long as an Othan, as not a real person, but his consciousness was still there. He reacts you understand why he's behaving this way, but he never actually brings it up. And it was so subtle, and I love that, because it just colored his character in a really nice way. Here, it's like they forgot it, instead of using it in a subtle way. They just completely forgot, oh shit, that's right. Rory not only waited, I mean, it was more than 1,000 years, because it would have been...
It was 2,000.
Yeah, it would have been just about 2,000 years. So, yeah, Rory not only waited all that time, but he was he was guarding the Pandorica. He was pulling it out of burning buildings during World War II and shit. It's Rory went through a bit more.
Yeah.
And very graceful.
And I saw someone say this online, and it made me laugh very hard. Rory's just too polite to bring that up.
Yeah.
Because that's who he is. Yeah, he loves Amy so much, he's never going to pull that card. But I was waiting for him to say something. Or wouldn't it have been a great romantic exchange for Amy to say, you waited 2,000 years for me. The least I could do is wait 23 for you. You could. That's such a simple line you could have done. But oh well. It's still a very strong episode at its core. I still probably, in the grand scheme of Amy Rory hours, my favorite is probably still the one from Series 5.
Amy's Choice?
Amy's Choice. I really loved Amy's Choice.
That's a good one.
But it's a close second for their stories. And I think, more importantly, it's a nice culmination point for them.
Yeah,
knowing what happens in the next episode. And I like how they start to, and they've done this whole season, bring these characters to a sort of natural conclusion.
Yeah, they're kind of bowing out
Yeah.
Amy and Rory, and I like that because
I
was kind of waiting for some fresh blood on the show.
Right, and I like the subtlety in bowing them out rather than
and then
sucking them into an alternate universe or something, at the last minute, and there's no build up to it. So that was nice. And again, the Doctor is not the focus of the episode, but he has some great stuff near the end where he has to hear, Amy yells at him, but I think the Doctor doesn't get it until Rory says, "Then I don't want to travel with you." And I think that's the first time a companion in the modern era really has said, because I know that's happened in Classic Who, but in the modern era has said something that outright dismissive of the Doctor's lifestyle and saying, "I would prefer a normal life to this." And that's a powerful moment because there's this romance to the Doctor and to his lifestyle, and I like breaking that for a moment and kind of examining it. And that's fascinating, I think. And that's what this episode... The next episode is much more about that, but this episode puts
sets it up.
Yeah.
Like, I like these two episodes.
And again, it's playing off of stuff that started to get set up in Good Man Goes to War and Let's Kill Hitler, and now it's just a good build of thematic progression, and that's what I like. And that brings us into another one that I thought was a very strong episode, and that's the
This is probably my second favorite episode of the season.
Okay.
If I had to rank them.
And this is a very good one. It's the God Complex. Tell us about it, Sean.
So the God Complex, it's probably actually the most complex. Like Doctor's Wife is a pretty complex episode. This Moffat episodes are pretty complex plot-wise, but the God Complex is very complex.
Who knew?
Yeah, no, but it's so basically the Doctor and his companions, they land on this what looks like some weird, like sort of like 1950s kind of The Shining-ish hotel.
Yeah.
And
oh God, do they love The Shining in this episode?
And it turns out that the hotel is basically, it's so fucking confusing. The hotel is a ship piloted by a Minotaur, which is a throwback to an old Doctor Who serial, Horns of Nimon, which has the Nimons are basically Minotaurs.
Okay.
I just realized I pronounced it the British way. I didn't even realize Americans say Minotaurs. Yeah. British people say Minotaurs.
And this is, I think, one of the first and only times in our lives we will ever be able to say the words "a spaceship piloted by a Minotaur."
Yeah, no. And so the Nimon are they're parasites across the universe, and I think this isn't actually a Nimon. They say it's like they mention Nimons. I know.
Yeah, it says here on Wikipedia.
Yeah, and it's like kind of a like offshoot or like cross species with them.
It says the Doctor identifies the beast as a being from a species who are close relatives to the Nimon.
Okay, yeah. So the parasites, and he's basically this guardian of this psychological prison, but this prison is like kidnapping people because it's been going on. It's something got messed up. And it's been going on for way too long, and it's basically kidnapping people and putting them through all this like crazy shit. And he's the warden of this prison, and he can't die because it's keeping him alive, and he has to keep on doing his job. And so it's a very, very. I love the pacing because the episode it drags, but not. It's weird. It drags, but it's not in a bad way.
Well, you know what? Again, that's The Shining. It drags like The Shining.
Yeah, it's like it like feels like it's really long. It's like you want it to be really long.
Yeah.
It feels way longer than 45 minutes to be. And it's really hard to explain, but it's not...
Well, and it is a longer episode. It is 50 minutes.
Oh, that might be... But like it still
that's
feels...
Only, I know.
Yeah, it still feels a lot longer than 50 minutes. And there's... And it also because it feels like it takes place over a pretty long period of time, too, because there's a lot of scenes of them waiting and trying to figure out what they're going to do, the Doctor trying to figure out what this is.
Yeah.
This is one of those episodes where the Doctor doesn't get it right away.
Which I like.
Yeah. Because a lot of the times in New Who, particularly, the Doctor's a bit too smart, he's a bit too clever, and this is one of the ones where he makes mistakes, and he's still trying to figure it out as everything's playing out, and he doesn't quite get it till pretty much near the end of the episode.
Right. And as long as we're talking about the general plot, because it becomes much more important in the general scope of the season at the end of the episode, but just for the sort of the main... fun, scary story, which is a very classic kind of Doctor Who hide behind the couch story. Yeah. But it has the guest characters who are kind of fighting alongside the Doctor and friends are wonderful, mostly because they have who was probably my favorite just guest character of the season, and that is Gibbous, who is from the Planet of Cowards.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I swear to God, Douglas Adams came back from the dead to write that character.
This definitely sounds like something from Hitchhikers.
Yes, and this guy, David Williams, played the character. Wonderful makeup work on him, because it's very subtle. He's still humanoid, but Gibbous was, everything he did made me laugh, and I like that they also sort of do a turn near the end and just make him a total bastard.
Yeah.
So, Gibbous is funny.
Yeah, I like Gibbous. I also like the Indian doctor.
Yeah.
Who, you can tell it's one of, they've done this a few times, particularly in the David Tennant years. It's kind of like the, Voyage of the Damned, where he's on the Titanic and, like, with Astrid.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those where it's like you can tell he wants to take her and to be another companion.
Yeah.
And you kind of get this feeling that the Doctor is moving on from Amy and Rory, which is set up for the end of the episode. But so you can tell he wants to take this girl with him and have her be the new companion. And she reminds me a lot of Martha.
Yeah, she did.
And so it's and if she had been a companion, I would have been fine with that. Although I knew she was going to die. She obviously wasn't going to end up being the companion.
No, this was clearly an episode where everyone was introduced to be a red shirt.
But it's more than just a red shirt.
Yeah, they were well-developed red shirts.
Yeah. And it is pretty sad.
They were like Tasha Yars, if you will.
But it was pretty sad when she died, because of how the Doctor, the Doctor, it's just always sad when he's like, I've met someone else, I'm going to take them to be companion, because that's just such an important thing to him. Yeah. And then when they die before he has a chance to do anything, it's very sad.
This episode, though, later on, the ultimate message, and this is something I honed in on in my review, was I like how the episode ultimately was very much about faith.
Yeah.
And it didn't have to, and it wasn't about faith in God, it was about faith in the way I like to explore faith, which is just about having faith in something, and how that is both a strength and a weakness. And the Doctor, to save Amy, has to break her faith in him. And outside of the Doctor's wife, this is my favorite Matt Smith scene in the season.
Yeah.
Where it's basically the dark twin to his Bluest Blue speech from Big Bang. Where he has to basically tell her all his negative qualities and say, I was vain, I wanted to be adored. And he delivers that so well. And Karen Gillan's reaction is so strong. And sad to this.
You also get another little Amelia cameo.
You do.
She was popped up all over the place this season. I just realized that. I didn't realize how much she'd been in it.
I wonder if she was like, I really like missing school to go film Doctor Who. Can you give me some more stuff, Stephen?
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, kids work for cheap. So, but yeah, great scene. And then, of course, where he decides to leave them. And I did not think this would be happening in the anti-penultimate episode.
Yeah, I didn't expect this to happen right now either.
Yeah, but it was organic. I felt there was no other way this episode could have ended.
Yeah,
when you get to that point. And of course, he's bought Rory a car, and it's such a
funny line. It's like, because it's one of the reasons I really wish that Rory and the Doctor had an episode and really got to play off each other more, because they don't do that much, but you can kind of see it here where. So the Doctor drops him off at this house, and he's like, "Okay, this is your house." And it's like, Rory's like, "Is that our car?" And it's like, "Yeah, that's my favorite car." How did you know that was my favorite car? Because you showed me a picture and said, "Ooh, this is my favorite car." This is the way I love how Matt Smith delivers that, because you just don't see that relationship between where Doctor and Rory are kind of like guy friends now.
Yep. Well, next episode, they're tired of their wives. Need a night on the moon. I don't know.
That sounds a bit more romantic than I was thinking.
I was going to say night on the town, but, the Doctor wouldn't just, go out drinking with Rory. He'd, take him to a, awesome planet for... I don't know. That came out wrong.
Okay, anyways. This is one probably the better, we're leaving this is up there with when the third Doctor leaves Jo Grant, companion departures. It's really well done. It's very emotional.
In fact...
I like that.
Yeah, the stuff where the Doctor leaves Rose, it kind of left me cold because I didn't like Rose at that point.
And then she keeps on coming back.
Yeah. Stuff with Martha, I thought was actually really powerful, except that they undermined it, 4 specials later.
Yeah.
The only one so far I've really loved was kind of how Martha left, but even then that was melodramatic. This was one that felt very organic, and I liked it. And I just...
Yeah, this is definitely the best one in New Who.
Yeah. So... and I think it's befitting of the best companions New Who has had. So, but also I do like that they leave the door open if they want to explore these characters more, and they do a little bit in the finale, but that's because they've got them contracted.
Yeah.
They should use them in the finale,
and it's like they kind of need to be there because it's also
it's about
I mean, I was just saying like I was kind of getting tired of these companions. I wanted fresh blood on the show. That doesn't mean I didn't want them in the finale. So it's good that they brought them back because that would have been kind of jarring.
Yeah,
if you was companionless.
So good ending to these characters. Good, really great episode. The next one. This one actually might be my second favorite of the season. Closing Time, I fucking loved this episode.
I really liked it. I didn't think it was like that good. Now,
I'm not going to go out and say it's a classic or a wonderful episode, but it just worked for me. My mood at the time, it kind of checked every box I like in Doctor Who, and it did it well. And does it reach the same heights as The Doctor's Wife or maybe the intellectual stuff of the God Complex? No, but I like how well it does what it aspires to do. And it does that pretty perfectly. And so this is the sequel to The Lodger, which is an episode from Series 31 that I liked, but didn't necessarily love. I thought it was one of the weaker ones that year, but that was a year of all strong episodes, so I still felt it was a strong hour. And very funny. I mean, The Lodger is a comedic masterpiece. This one was even funnier in my mind, because you have Baby Stormageddon. And if that is not the funniest thing you could have the Doctor doing, I don't know what is. Talking to a baby for an hour.
The playoff between the Doctor and the baby is fitting. Because part of it is also, you're not quite sure if the Doctor's just talking out his ass.
Yeah.
Because they have a little bit of it in Good Men Goes to War, because he talks to little Melody Pond.
Yeah.
And so, but you don't. He's like, yeah, I speak baby, but you don't know if he's just like jerking them around or not, because the Doctor does it all the time. And so, but he does it so much in this episode with little. What is the baby's actual name?
Oh, I don't. It's Stormy, Stormageddon.
But he accepts his.
It's Alfie.
Alfie, Alfie. It's like so. You've got James Corden playing Craig again.
Yeah.
Dude was from The Lodger, and he's moving on with his life, and he has a child now, and he's basically going to take care of the child over the weekend while his wife is away, and that's when the Doctor pops in on his farewell tour. Because this is taking place, they say 200 years later in his timeline. Who knows how long it actually is?
Yeah.
But I like that Matt Smith kind of brings back like the slightly different persona that he had in The Impossible Astronaut. He's got that on again.
Right.
And it was very subtle, and I like that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, just on the surface, Closing Time is like The Lodger. It's a comedy. And it's very funny. There's the stuff with Stormageddon. Craig Owens is a really good character. James Corden, I'm continually shocked at how well he fits in with Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And especially his chemistry with Matt Smith is out of this world. And they just, as a comedic duo, you can't beat them. They're great together for Doctor Who comedy. It's just really good. Lots of funny stuff. I like the people in the shop they're hanging out with.
I love the fact that the Doctor is just working for a shop. Like, that's so... And he's got the name tag, and it's like... They gave me a name tag in case I forget what I'm called. Yeah. It's very thoughtful. It says the Doctor, I'm here to help.
And I love that, of course, he's the best employee. Everyone loves him.
And like everyone just loves us. Like, oh, the Doctor's here. Oh, you're the friend of the Doctor? Okay, you're cool then.
Yeah, pretty cool. And they've done gay jokes on Doctor Who before. This one was particularly funny because
it was built up for so long.
Yeah. I liked it.
Like, I didn't even really expect there to be payoff. I just thought that the old woman would, like, continue to think that they're just a gay couple and would never, like, kind of, like, come up to their attention. But that was a funny scene.
Yeah. So, just a very funny, but what really separated this one from me is that it had a deeper layer that really connected, and it actually had two. It was a great story about being a new parent, and I saw reactions from some critics who are new parents or have had kids, and they really thought it was very organically done, and that those are the same, those were very natural fears for Craig, and very relatable. I think you don't have to have kids to understand that. And the way the 11th Doctor helps Craig, work through that, really fun stuff. And I think it meant a lot. I love how they tie the ending into Craig's humanity is based around his son, and he has this adventure to learn basically how to be a better father. And he's desperate, but he's not desperate because he doesn't want to be a dad. It's because he's worried about letting down his kid or his wife. And really good stuff there. And then the other thing, and this is where the title comes from, or the title might be a reference to an old film, but in terms of the internal continuity, this is the Doctor's farewell tour. He's both very funny in this episode and very reflective, and he has a great speech about his time being up. near the end to a sleeping Craig. But I mean, Matt Smith.
And
Again,
he has the scene with Stormageddon, where it's just him and Stormageddon.
That's great.
That's a really good scene.
Yes, that's another one that reminded me of his Bluest Blue speech. And he has some great speeches in here. And that Stormageddon one shows his range in this episode, where he starts being very funny and modulates into this reflective tone that I think is really powerful. And so I really loved this episode for all of that. And we haven't even talked about the Cybermen yet. I thought this was a good implementation of the Cybermen. They just needed a boogeyman to set the plot in motion, because this was not an episode about the monster. This was an episode it was an examination of Craig as father and the Doctor as a dying man, and they needed a boogeyman to set that off. And the Cybermen are good for that.
Yeah.
And I liked that it was, they were working behind the scenes, which is a very classic Cybermen thing. And then again, it's about almost a sort of very tragic moment of humanity versus non-humanity, which is what the Cybermen represent, and ultimately humanity wins because of Craig's baby, and
Mm-hmm. And also,
really
like once again, there's been so many callbacks to old school Who, and they as far as I'm aware, the Cybermen in this episode weren't like the alternate universe Cybermen. I think they're basically meant to be this universe's Cybermen. They just are using the same costumes because they're not going to try to completely redesign the villain right now. And I still hope that they do an episode around reintroducing this universe's Cybermen and saying "fuck you" the Age of Steel in those episodes and the alternate universe Cybermen, because that's bullshit. But in this, I really like that they brought back Cybermats, because Cybermats haven't been on the show since like the second Doctor era. They haven't used Cybermats in fucking forever. And I like the redesign of the Cybermat. It has like teeth and shit. That's cool.
Yeah. That was fun. And I mean, the Cybermat was both a good villain and a wonderful just comedic foil. Yeah. So I loved this episode all around. Fun stuff. I looked at Gareth Roberts, the writer, after watching it. I realized I've loved all of the episodes he's written. He's written nothing but good stuff. Unicorn and the Wasp, particularly from Series 4. I made a top 10 modern Who episodes list before Series 31 aired, before Matt Smith was the Doctor, and that was on there fairly high, because I very much liked that. So,
I think one of the, not necessarily weak, but where I think the story could have, they could have, done something different, and maybe if, depending on how they handled it, it could have been a lot better. Yeah. But it could have completely fucked up the episode, is at the end, where Craig he's captured by the Cybermen, and the process of cyber converting him has kind of started, but then Craig stops it through the crying Stormageddon and everything, and saved you with the power of love, and they make some good jokes out of that. But I think the episode could have been better if they had made a more serious turn, and not had it necessarily where Craig dies, but where the cyber conversion kind of half works. Because I have no fucking clue how he broke out of the cyber helmet. That didn't make any sense. And they kind of make fun of how it doesn't really make sense. But I think if they had gone a slightly darker approach where Craig is still alive, but he's partially cyber converted. And so it wouldn't have had a really happy ending. And I think they could have played some of that with how the Doctor's going to die and kind of bringing in a lot of darker emotions at the end. And I think it could have had a really good turn.
I think that would have been too dark myself.
It's like I said, it depends on how they handle it, but I think if they had done it, it could have been done really brilliantly. Yeah. I'm not saying that Closing Time is bad because they didn't do it. I really like Closing Time as it is, but when I was watching it, I was like, it kind of felt like a cop-out to me. They could have got, the way they were leading it, they definitely could have gone further with it, and they maybe went a bit too far with how much he got cyber converted, because the whole helmet got put on him.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's it just kind of breaks up through the middle and pops off his head.
That's more my problem than the darkness of the ending or something. I think they did go too far because there's a logical problem there. Yeah. I like the tone of the entire episode just fine.
But I mean, a lot of stuff has done that very well by taking a light comedic tone and then making it, putting a really dark twist on it, and then using that to make a point. I think they could have done that very well.
I know.
Once again, not saying that what they did was bad.
And I do hope we see James Corden again in the future, because I don't know if I would ever want him as a full-time companion.
Yeah, that would be kind of grating, I think.
Yeah, but I think he works very well in these one-off stories.
Yeah, especially with for an episode just written specifically for him and the Doctor together.
Right. Oh, and I also really liked the little Amy Rory cameo they did in this episode.
Oh yeah, that was well done.
I had no clue Amy's desire in life was to become a perfume model.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, good for her. But it was just a nice emotional beat. And this was an episode full of those, and I also liked the ending material setting up the finale where the Doctor gets the envelopes, he gets the... I like the idea that Craig gave him the Stetson.
Yeah.
That just feels right to me. And then I do love in Wedding of River Song, you see how long he wore that Stetson for. That's just brilliant. But anyway, the stuff at the very end with Madame Kovarian getting River Song into the astronaut suit felt tacked on.
It felt like, need a lead-in.
Yeah.
It's
I thought that should have maybe been seeded a couple times during the season, like in standalones, have Alex Kingston appear a few times to develop that. And I understand it's expensive to put Alex Kingston in every episode. I think that
then also would have kind of broken, I don't know, they couldn't have thrown it in God Complex or Girl Who Waited, because it would have just broken up the flow.
I understand. So I think that's just, it was fine as is. It's just a moment that is jarring.
Yeah, it's just so obviously there because they need to set up the season finale.
Yeah. I almost think
could have probably handled it
I actually almost think in Wedding of River Song that could have just been the first scene before the credits, and then come in with the pre-credit scene of Wedding of River Song as the first post-credit scene. But that's just me.
Yeah.
Anyway, but let's talk about the Wedding of River Song. This is the only episode of the season I think Sean and I largely diverge on. Because otherwise, you and I have agreed on everything pretty much.
Yeah.
There have been little things like the pacing of Day of the Moon and to what degree that bothers us, but we both agreed it had pacing.
Yeah.
Do you outright dislike this, or do you just have problems with it?
I'm still not entirely sure. I want to wait, maybe another week, and then I'm going to rewatch it and see how I feel about it then. But my initial impression was that I just didn't like the episode. Not that I...
Okay.
It's kind of I know it's not a horrible episode, but it could have, it's one of those things where it's it could have been handled in such a better way, and the fact that they didn't, it has, for me at least, the biggest pacing issues of any episode of Doctor Who I think I've ever seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
It's the pacing is all over the place on this.
Well, I was going to say, let me start with this discussion. I quite liked the finale, and one thing, your problems with it are actually very different than most people's, and I think yours are much more thoughtful, and I appreciate your criticism more. A lot of people are this wasn't the epic finale we were looking for.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't going to be an epic finale. I don't care.
Liked that this was so different than any finale they've done, because, for one, it would have been suicide to try doing another two-parter after doing Pandorica Open / Big Bang, which to me is the highlight of modern Doctor Who. And if any of you don't agree with that, it's certainly one of the highlights.
Yeah, it's the best finale they've done.
There's no way you can top that. Why try? So I like that they decide, especially because with a finale like that, a lot of the establishing work has to be done internally in those two parts. All the establishing work has been done for Wedding of River Song. Mm-hmm. So you don't need two parts.
Yeah.
I think this one could have used an hour instead of 45 minutes, but that's, for now, anyway. But I liked that this was a smaller scale episode, and more importantly, I felt as a final episode, it culminated everything I wanted culminated within the season, and I think it did a fairly good job at it. And I know you have different opinions on this, but just let me explain.
Okay.
I think the emotional arc of the season is about the Doctor and his self-loathing and how it's brought him to this point where at the end of closing time and the beginning of this episode, he's ready to die, and he has many problems with himself and how he uses companions and stuff. And I like how this episode resolves that. I really like that, where he has a moment of self-redemption at the end, where he realizes he doesn't need to think this. A lot of good stuff there. I liked how they, tied off a lot of the mysteries I cared about. I know there are ones left over. I also know Matt Smith and Stephen Moffat are doing at least 2 more seasons together. They have plenty of time for that, whatever. I thought they resolved what needed to be resolved with the internal structure of this season. And I was fairly good on that. We will talk about the Tesselecta revelation. That is the only thing that I feel undermined the episode for me, because that was just lazy. There is no other word for it than lazy. And that is the first time I will ever accuse Stephen Moffat of being lazy, and I hope it's the last. But anyway, other than that, I liked it. And I especially love how this episode sort of makes you realize that what this season was about was scaling back the series. And I love that the last 5 minutes are the Doctor talking to Dorium, and you realize that, okay, he's faked his death, and everyone thinks he's dead now, and now he's going to operate more in the shadows. That is a tremendous setup for future seasons, and I think it implies that they're not going to have this kind of tight-knit serialized storytelling, at least in the next season, because now they have something where the Doctor can just be low-key and go have adventures, and I feel that returns the show to something they have not had so far in the modern series, which is where the Doctor is allowed to operate with anonymity. I like in classic episodes where the Doctor can go somewhere and no one knows a thing about him, and I think that can be a really cool method of storytelling. They have not had that in the modern series, by and large. It's a lot of stuff where the Doctor's legend sort of follows him everywhere. And I really do like the setup for the next season with that. And I like how this episode got there. I very much enjoyed the Doctor's sort of flashback talk with Winston Churchill, because I really like Ian McNeice as, in this episode, Emperor Winston Churchill. I think this was a messy episode. I will say that. I liked it. I liked it as a finale. It was messy, and I think part of that is I don't know if the idea of all points in time freezing was entirely necessary. But I liked that it allowed the Doctor to have this big examination before he goes to his death. And where the Tesselecta thing pisses me off on that is that it undermines the examination he was doing of himself, because he had already secured his own safety so long before any of that self-examination happened. It was a non-issue. I wish it would have been something in that moment where he was able to save himself. It doesn't bother me as much as it would, because I think the Tesselecta thing ultimately allows us to get to that point where the Doctor is anonymous, he can go have new adventures. I like that setup. But, it's lazy and it undermines parts of the episode. But overall, I thought the bringing back the silence, I thought they were effectively used here. I liked the use of Amy and Rory. It was another nice alt-world Amy-Rory story. Alex Kingston is always so phenomenal as River. I really liked her stuff. The sequence, the actual titular wedding, was my favorite scene of the episode. Okay, actually, second favorite. We'll get to my favorite in a second. But I really liked that. If they were going to do a thing where the Doctor gets married, that's how I like it, where it's not an outright marriage, air quote, but it's something where he is accepting that people love him and he can love them back. And it's a good culmination point for his arc that he has had this year, which I feel has been a very strong arc. So I liked it. My favorite scene of the episode, and you probably agree, is when the Doctor is kind of rebelling against his own death, and he hears that Brigadier Stewart has died, and he says, "It's time." And the way Matt Smith delivers "it's time," and the fact that they call back to the Brigadier, that put a tear in my eye. That was brilliant.
Yeah, no, that was definitely...
Why don't you talk about the history of that more?
So the Brigadier is... I mean, you could, kind of with Sarah Jane Smith, the most prolific companions in the history of Doctor Who. Sarah Jane Smith has been in more episodes, but the Brigadier has spanned more time than any other companion in the history of Doctor Who, and that he was introduced in the second Doctor era. I mean, his second story ever is my favorite Doctor Who story, The Invasion.
Well, and if you want to know how prolific he was, when we did our project, Sean just gave me one serial from each Doctor, and I saw 3 Brigadier stories.
Because then he's also... The third Doctor era was just kind of a black sheep. I mean, not to say that it's bad, but it's different. It's so different than everything else in Doctor Who, because the Doctor's kind of attached to Earth. And so, almost all of them for his first 2 seasons are all Earth-based. And so he's hanging out with Unit and the Brigadier that entire time. So the Brigadier's basically... It's one of the few times they've had a big cast on Doctor Who, and it was the Doctor, his female companion, the Brigadier, Captain Mikey Yates, and Sergeant Benton all together, the Unit team, solving, running around, solving all these crazy mysteries and stuff. And so, in the third Doctor era is a much-loved era from a lot of Whovians. And so the Brigadier's all over that, and then he keeps on popping up all the time because he's just such a great character.
He's so
Nicholas
awesome.
Courtney is so... He's the ultimate British general,
he's
basically.
The guy they make fun of on Monty Python in every episode. He's basically who Graham Chapman would always play.
He's got the wax mustache. He's always standing up straight, always. Even in the battlefield, which is his. I think it's his last episode on the show.
Great episode,
or the show all the way, and he's still always standing all the way up straight, totally military the entire episode. And Nicholas Courtney was pretty old at that point because he was in his 20s when he started on the show in 1967 would have been the first year he was on the show. And so he's been with all the Doctors on screen, if you include Dimensions in Time for him with 6th Doctor, which is kind of a fuzzy one. He's appeared with the 8th Doctor and the 6th Doctor in audio dramas. He's done a lot of audio dramas. Nicholas Courtney, one of the great prolific actors in the history of Doctor Who, and he sadly died
February of this year.
February of this year, and so it was just a great callback in the perfect way for the Doctor to realize that he has to face up to this. And there's I've read a lot of complaints about how it doesn't quite make sense because of he's got a time machine that's like he could go revisit the Brigadier basically whenever he would want to, which is true, but it's more about he realizes now that even someone he loves so much as the Brigadier, like this toughest person he's probably ever met in his entire life, has to die eventually. And that he has to, so that gives the Doctor strength that I need to go face my own death now.
And that's what I loved about the wedding of River Song. It's messy, but I feel that theme in the Brigadier scene is what the entire episode is about. And it's about life and death and love and friendship. And I love the examination of those themes. The Tesselecta thing in the last minute undermines some of that, but it doesn't undermine it to the point where I disliked the episode. And again, the last scene with Dorium, loved that. And I think there was, again, a lot of good Moffat imagination here, even though I think once in a while it got away with him in this episode. But, I've always liked Dorium, and I thought the first scene with Dorium was a little too talky, but I liked the idea of Dorium just being a head in a box, because that seems like a proper fate for that guy. But what did you think of Wedding of River Song?
As I said, the pacing is all over the place, because it starts with, you've got the all points in time are coinciding in one point of time, which is I really love that idea. It does not need to be in this episode at all.
No.
That should be its own fucking episode. That should be a standalone episode. That's a great, like the opening part where, they've got, it's kind of going around, assuming it's London, you've got like cars flying on hot air balloons, you've got a park with pterodactyls in it, you've got all this really crazy creative stuff, like the Holy Roman Empire still exists and Winston Churchill is the head of it. I love that idea, but it should be its own episode. It doesn't fit in this.
How British is it that when all points in time converge, Winston Churchill is the ultimate leader of all?
Yeah, he's the head of the Holy Roman Empire.
I love that.
And so
I think that would be a good premiere or something to come back on. It's like a crazy idea like this and then thrown into it.
It's just like, it's a really good Doctor Who idea, but it doesn't. It just makes this episode very jumbled to me, because you start off with this really crazy thing, then the Doctor gets introduced, then the Doctor starts flashing back to how the Doctor got to this point, and while the Doctor's flashing back, it's like you get like 2-minute long shots and then cut, then cut, then cut, then cut, and it cuts all the time, cutting all over the place while the Doctor's trying to set up all this stuff. You don't have any strong sense of continuity, you don't have any strong sense of what the Doctor's trying to do, and while it's cutting between all this stuff in the flashbacks, it starts cutting to stuff in the present, or I guess present time, where all time is in one point, so you don't get a strong sense of what's going on. You don't really, it's kind of like the beginning of Day of the Moon, where you're just thrown into this and you don't know what's going on, and it feels like kind of a contrived way of setting up the story. They should have just started where the story starts. They should have just picked up from basically the end of Closing Time, where the Doctor's finishing his farewell tour, and you kind of follow him while he's trying to figure stuff out. That should have been the first half of the episode, instead of having this very confusing thing where he's also talking to Winston Churchill, and then he's also doing all the stuff like visiting the Tesselecta.
You know what it felt like was a two-parter shoved into one, because that thing where he would be like explaining it to Winston felt like it would be its own episode, and then in part 2 we would pick up now that we've caught up or something.
Yeah, and so it does feel like these two episodes kind of got like squished together, and it didn't need to be like that. You just didn't need to have the Winston Churchill stuff.
Right, and again, I liked that to a point, but I do agree there are structural problems.
It's like it's like the first half of the episode, so you spend all this time very confused, and half of it is used in a very pointless way. It's not like, it doesn't fulfill anything plot-wise, and in such a plot-heavy, tight episode, everything needs to be important. You can't have any confusing fluff thrown in.
And
there.
When you were talking about the pacing and the cut, I think part of that is a directorial problem. This was directed by Jeremy Webb, who the only other Doctor Who he's ever done is Curse of the Black Spot. Oh. These are the only 2 episodes I feel directorially were weak. And because Curse of the Black Spot was just pacing and everything. We talked about that. And the way his stuff was choreographed, strangely directed, and I would say maybe with some ineptitude in the direction. This one, I don't know why they picked him to direct the finale when you could have had Toby Haynes, who I feel would have hit this one out of the park and redeemed a lot of the flaws you've just pointed out. So.
Yeah, but anyways, and then so you've got And then the Doctor gets, I forget exactly what happens. But does the Doctor get kidnapped by Amy? Is that he gets like stunned and then kidnapped, right? And he gets put on the train?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, because actually the silents are there, and then the people with the eye patches come to rescue him.
Come to rescue him, and then he gets knocked out or whatever, and he wakes up on the train with Amy. And now this is another thing that I don't quite like, is the whole thing with, it's kind of half an alternate universe because all time is coming together, but it's also kind of not, where Amy does kind of know him, but she doesn't quite know him, and I don't know why she doesn't quite know him, but she does kind of know him.
It was inconsistent.
Yeah, and so that whole concept doesn't quite make sense, and I don't understand why you need to have the scene where the Doctor and Amy have to reintroduce themselves to each other, because you don't have enough time for that scene. Yeah. And then you've got Rory in the episode where I always like Arthur Darville's, I don't know what it is, like he's like very quietly charismatic. I don't know what it is, and he's very good. But it's also like Rory doesn't even. It's like you get a few throwaway lines between Amy and Rory, which are kind of nice. But him not being Rory really in the episode is just distracting. It doesn't need to be like that.
Well, a finale where you would have this building on the character development we've had all year would have hit home more.
Yeah, but now you have Amy that's not really Amy, and Rory that's not quite Rory. They're not the Amy and Rory we know.
Yeah.
Although one thing I do like, and I don't know if this is even intentional, but going back to callbacks, this probably isn't intentional at all, but there was an old, I think it's called The Inferno, there's an old Third Doctor story where the Third Doctor goes to an alternate universe accidentally, and the Brigadier has an eye patch, and I like that this is kind of an alternate universe, and like everyone has the eye patch. I don't think it's intentional, it just is kind of a coincidence because of the Lady Kavarian thing.
I did like the idea of the eye patch, and that there was more significance to it than just...
That's a good thing to combat the silence, I like that. Yeah. Then now you run into another problem, is that and this was one of the problems you had with Good Man Goes to War, and I had a bit more faith, and my faith has not yet been rewarded, in that Lady Kovarian never was set up right. Like, she's thrown in, she's never given good motivation, you never learn anything about her, and she gets killed in this episode. She could come back, and you could do stuff with her, with, like, time stuff. But there's no reason to do, like, there's no real reason to do it now, because you know what happens to the character.
Right, and
they could set up her motivation, but it would have been so much stronger if they had done... Like, I thought that was going to be part of this episode, was finding out why Kovarian was doing what Kovarian was doing, and you don't really. Like, you can't throw in, like, the Doctor...
In the end, it didn't bother me too much, because I also found the character somewhat grating, and I feel she was... I think we may have read more into her than we were meant to, and that's a flaw in the show.
Yeah, she's set up as, like, the badass villain, like, behind the
But what I'm saying is, I think the idea was just that she was this bitchy villain who was supposed to go down, and what it comes across as in execution is that we're supposed to learn stuff about her.
Yeah, because there's so little understood about her that they kind of give you little hints about how she's... Because she obviously has some personal thing against the Doctor, because they have a handful of conversations in Good Man Goes to War. Obviously, there's something between her and the Doctor where she hates the Doctor so much, and you never know why. And that's... So Lady Kovarian never works as a villain. You still don't know that much about the Silence. You know that they're a religious order. So them as a villain, I was hoping would develop more, but really they're, once again, only used as a tool. Yeah. And then you come to the wedding part, and I love Matt Smith in this whole episode. No problems with how Matt Smith's doing anything at all. And I also really like how he looks with shaggy hair.
Yeah, that was good.
It was a really good look, and with the eye patch and the long coat, I really
like... He could be a pirate.
Yeah, no. And I loved all of the scene where it's like right before he gets married, and he's talking to River about how... Because all this happened because River doesn't shoot him.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to be a fixed point in time, so she doesn't shoot him. He's supposed to die, but whatever. Yeah. And so all of time is collapsing in on itself, which is kind of like... I don't know how River is just kind of able to just... Because it's been addressed before in Water of Mars, where the Doctor tries to alter a fixed point in time, and then time just kind of finds a way to work around it, and where the astronaut kills herself in that episode. And so they've addressed the fixed point in time stuff before, and I don't... Maybe it's because she's half Time Lord, but then the Doctor's full Time Lord.
It's not a fixed point in time, though, because he's in the Tesselecta. That's why it's not a fixed point in time.
But that doesn't make sense, because regardless... The Doctor is supposed to be in the Tesselecta no matter what, and the Tesselecta is what gets shot. The Doctor never is supposed to die, really. So if the fixed point in time, as far as I understand it, how it should work, how it kind of is set up, is that the Tesselecta with the Doctor inside it being shot is a fixed point in time, and that cannot be altered.
Okay, I assumed...
But somehow River just I'm not going to do that.
Well, here, what I assumed was it was never actually a fixed point in time. People read it that way, like in the universe.
But why
was,
then does all of time start collapsing in on itself? That explanation doesn't work.
I thought time was collapsing in on itself because it's fucking confusing.
Yeah, it doesn't. So you see, it doesn't quite make sense, and I don't understand how River just. No. Like I thought it was going to, and this would have been really brilliant if there was like split timelines instead of all time converging on itself. Where there's a timeline where River does. I think Lost did something like this, but I never quite finished watching Lost. Where like River does shoot him in a timeline where River doesn't.
Lost is nothing like that, but in the
isn't
premiere,
there something
you're
like
led you're led to believe that for a little bit, but that's not what it ultimately is.
And there's like stuff like it's addressed a lot in the DC Comics universe.
That would have been a fascinating sort of It's a Wonderful Life thing where the Doctor could look at one world where he dies and one where he doesn't.
Yeah, and like
that would have, I agree. That would have hammered home the point of the Doctor's self-loathing and later self-acceptance better.
Yeah, and I thought that was what they were going with, and then it was like, no, all time is converging.
Well, for instance, you're talking about the different versions of the characters. I love the moment where Amy kills Madame Kovarian because God knows she has the right to, but this Amy doesn't necessarily have those strong feelings. So I don't. It would have been stronger if you just. You know.
And then also it's how she remembers that later, but then and then also the actual wedding between the Doctor and River song never quite hit an emotional point for me because it always felt like. The Doctor, like before that, it was really emotional where the Doctor's saying, "What are you doing? You cannot do this." And I think, what is the line? He has like the really great line, like, "I'm disappointed in you."
Yeah.
And he says that to River, and I thought that was so great because it's almost like, I mean, it really felt like it was calling back to Water of Mars to me, where the Doctor has learned from his experience of being in his ninth regeneration, and that he's figured out, you can't start messing with time like this.
Yeah.
This isn't a good thing to do. And so he was hoping better from River. But then you don't really, you get kind of the reverse message in the end where it's like, you can't just kind of fuck around with time because the Doctor's going to fix it anyways. But it's kind of just jumbled, and it always kind of felt like he was just using the wedding thing to convince River. So it's not like there's no
I thought it was
real
more organic.
It didn't felt like an emotional thing from the Doctor to me. It felt like
I think that just depends on the viewer maybe. But for me, it hit me just because I thought that was a moment of that's his self-acceptance, is that I think he has developed. He'll never develop a love for River the way she would love him, but I think he's developed as close to what the Doctor can have to love for another person, maybe, but in this point in his life. And I liked that point because it was him saying, I don't need to be self-loathing at this point. I can have companions, I can have this, and this is a woman who loves me, and I think she is the only person who understands me on this kind of level in my life, and you know what, fuck it, let's do it. And he uses his bow tie, and that was pretty cool.
I like that he used the bow tie, but again, it's like he's like, I'm disappointed in you, and like they have the whole conversation, and then it's almost like he's like, okay, I'm going to do this now, instead of just like, because they set this up in her first appearance, because they set it up in Silence at the Library, where the Doctor's like, you know my name, there's only one way you can know my name. And it's like, and basically you're thinking, oh, they like, because it's like the romantic thing, they probably got married, and that's a time-long tradition. And so leaving that up to the imagination, I don't think they should have even had the actual wedding on screen.
Okay.
Because and then using it as a tool just kind of is weird. It doesn't give the emotional feeling. And once again, this is kind of, I watch everything a lot more from the Doctor's point of view, because like I've watched so much Doctor Who, and it just feels very cold from the Doctor, instead of where before you were getting this, that the Doctor really does feel something for River before. Like, because they have that one scene where they kiss, and it's like the first time he kisses her, and that's like the only time this version of the Doctor has ever shown any romantic inclination whatsoever. So you think maybe something can actually happen here, but then nothing really does. And instead it's just like, I need to do this so that I convince you that you shooting me wasn't a bad idea because I'm really the test selecting. Yes, that's a massive fucking cop-out. Like the biggest...
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that was the biggest disappointment of the episode. Because if they had been able to come up with a really cool way to get the Doctor... I don't even know what it would have been, but a cool way to get the Doctor out of having
couldn't it have revolved around him marrying River? And I don't know, it could have been something cheesy, like he has this ultimate show of faith for another person, gives her his name, and that somehow does something. I don't know what the ultimate result of that is.
They could have done split timelines.
I'm not the one writing the show, though. That's not my...
Yeah, and Moffat should have had something better. If he's going to do killing the Doctor.
A Ganger Doctor would have been better because they built up the Gangers as real people.
Yeah, and that would have been disappointing, but it still would have been better. Yeah. And that was one of the things is like, I don't think that, like, was one of the biggest problems with the split, or the converging timeline, or all time points at the same time, whatever thing, just distracted. It didn't need to be there. It should have, I was hoping that, like, it was all still going to be kind of in Monument Valley and the Doctor's working behind the scenes and something kind of like that, instead of this weird, like, them all being in the, like, it just didn't feel like that meshed with the episode. It was that was one of the biggest flaws, I think, is that decision was so distracting. And it made the pacing so weird. It made having to do the flashbacks very distracting. It made the setup way longer than it had to be. And then to an ultimately disappointing payoff of him just being the Tesselecta.
And, the Tesselecta thing bothers me. It undermines a lot of what I loved about the episode. It doesn't...
And it makes the worst thing is it makes the Impossible Astronaut worse, also. Because it's like, fuck, he's just in the Tesselecta the whole time. Yeah. It doesn't actually... Makes the scene where the Doctor gets shot just now doesn't have any impact.
I know, and because they spent... this is what I started my review of the season with. In Impossible Astronaut was... I was quoting A Christmas Carol saying the Doctor was dead to begin with. Sort of showing how Moffat does the same thing Charles Dickens does in hammering home, this person is dead. And that's what
because they even say it's like, a Borgin Shepherd comes and is like, he's dead. There's no way he's going to live. It's like, that's actually the Doctor, and he is most certainly dead. He says that. It's like... No, that's the Tesselecta. I mean, and I thought they were going to bring Canton Everett Delaware the Third back to.
And I agree, if it had been the Gangers, that may have been predictable, but that actually, the way they built up the Gangers so well, then yes, you could say that is the Doctor, because that really would be a version of the Doctor, and that would have impact, because they spent a good two-parter building that up.
Yeah, and if they had actually, and they could have had some really great scenes with the Doctor, like, addressing, like, I just actually sent, like, an actual, like, real thing to die.
Yeah.
It's like, because the Ganger is, like, really life. Like, they could have set that. That would have been so much better, because the Tesselecta just didn't fucking make sense.
What you could have is, like, you could have at the end of the episode, instead of, so River, same kind of thing, River's talking to Amy, and Amy's sad because the Doctor's dead, and River says, well, actually, and then you flash back, and maybe River is... crying in prison or something, and the Doctor comes to visit her and reveals, and then you see maybe a flashback to the Doctor creating a Ganger and asking this Ganger to die for him.
Yeah.
And this Doctor understanding, because the Ganger Doctor would have the same knowledge. And I think that would have been a powerful, and you know what? I would have had no problems with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have either. It would have been predictable, but it wouldn't have been bad predictable.
Yeah.
It's like, I knew, because I didn't think there's going to be something so completely insane nobody would have ever seen it for how the Doctor got out of it. But the Tesselecta just didn't fit. It didn't make sense.
And disappointing, but the ultimate ending of the season, him with Dorium, I quite liked. I liked the... So you did not like Doctor Who?
It was so cheesy. It was just, Doctor Who! And what I love is...
If Dorium had said it once and whispered it, I would have...
Yeah, it would have been better.
I liked it. I agree. It got over the top.
It was... But what I love is, because I go on a website called Reddit that's kind of like, has a bunch of different specific community sub-sites. And I am a frequenter of the Doctor Who one, because I've seen so much Doctor Who. Might as well.
You a frequenter of a Doctor Who?
Spread my Doctor Who knowledge across the interwebs. But so, all the fucking somehow people were blown away by the fact that the question was Doctor Who. And I'm sitting there just like, how is it not the first thing you think of?
It was not the first thing I thought of, but like when I saw it, I thought, that's clever. I didn't think it was unpredictable.
I didn't even think it was necessarily that clever, because it's just like, as soon as it says the question, and we've had this since Let's Kill Hitler, so we've had quite a long time to think about, what would the question be? It was like, the fucking show title is a question. The show title is Doctor Who.
Yeah.
The entire show, you do not know what his name is. They bring up that fact in A Good Man Goes to War. Like, how did people not know?
What I meant by clever was, I thought, my prediction was it was going to be, what is the Doctor's name? But Doctor's Doctor. I didn't know they were going to use that wording, and that's what I found. That's the only thing that...
How could you not... Like, the problem is, I don't... Like, I kind of like the idea, like, the question, like, that's so mysterious, but the problem is, having it be Doctor Who is the cheesiest fucking thing you could possibly do on this show, is to make the title Doctor Who, like, a plot function in an episode. And to, like... start bringing that up now. Like, it's like you don't need to bring that up. And I always hate when they do the fucking jokes where it's like, what is his name? Doctor Who. And it's like, they do those jokes way too much in New Who.
But
maybe it's because I've seen so much. It's like you don't need to do those jokes.
I thought this was a good use of the Doctor Who pun. I'm interested in seeing it more forward. If every time they want to bring this up, it's someone going Doctor Who and make a big deal out of it. I think what they need to do with it moving forward is a subtler examination of his identity. That will be fascinating. This is different. So.
And just like the problem is, the Doctor Who thing is so cheesy. But if you make it the question on Doctor Who, it has to be Doctor Who. It could not possibly be another thing. You could not possibly make a question that isn't Doctor Who when the question's the plot
thing. That's why I like that plot point.
But it makes it so fucking cheesy. It's like it's a double-edged sword. It's a catch-22. It's like if you have the question, you have to make the question Doctor Who. But if you make the question Doctor Who, it's really cheesy and very distracting and breaking the fourth wall, winking at the audience, and I don't like that. I think it breaks that too much. It is so cheesy.
Then I guess you and I disagree on that point.
And then I have one other important thing to address.
The other thing you liked about this episode?
I thought it looked nice. I like Matt Smith. Like I said, I liked his long hair.
Okay.
But
what's your?
I didn't even realize I had these many problems with it until I started doing this podcast.
That's what the podcast is for.
Because I haven't really talked about it with.
This is like therapy for nerds.
Then no, because you were saying it's the culmination of the character arc and the Doctor's self-loathing, and I agree with that. But the problem is they've been setting this up for a very long time, and especially with The Good Man Goes to War, it deals with this a lot. The problem is all the stuff that they're talking about, the reason why they're going after the Doctor, all that stuff, like him running through the Gamma Forest, like the stuff that Dorian alludes to, like the fall of the 11th, all that stuff, that hasn't happened yet. The Doctor has not yet gone to the point that has gotten all these people to go after him. And so he hasn't yet gotten to the point where he needs to have this character development. So eventually he's going to do the thing that makes the Silence want to kill him because he hasn't done it yet. And so there's no reason for him to have the character development before he's actually done the thing to warrant the character development. It's like this weird...
That's fair.
He's regretting something he's going to do in the future that he hasn't done yet. And maybe it can be played off really well if they do it right when it's addressed.
Okay, and here's what my interpretation of it always was. I just thought it was about that what his regrets were and why people were after him was the Doctor's fame and his ability to instill change in the universe, and people were either jealous or mad.
But the inciting incident hasn't yet occurred, which isn't as powerful.
Okay, and I didn't know if it was an incident or it was, again, if this question is ever answered, that it'll be something bad. And that's what I assumed it was.
Yeah, but it's like the question hasn't been asked. Yeah. Like, all this stuff leading to the Silence attacking him hasn't happened. And now, then you also have... You said they haven't answered a lot of questions. And for me, the only thing they properly summed up, the concluded, was the Doctor dying. They did resolve, it's the Tesselecta. But the fact that he hasn't yet done whatever it's going to be means that his character development isn't quite done, leaving that story thread open. So that, which was introduced in Good Man Goes to War, that was like the crux of Good Man Goes to War, that's still open. And they still haven't addressed, like, how exactly the Silence got the TARDIS to blow up. All that stuff from season 31. Yeah. And so you're leaving, I don't think you have to answer every single question, but these are very big, important ones that are starting to cascade. Yeah. And yes, they have a lot of episodes, but those episodes are going to bring up questions.
That's
and when
true.
You're bringing up all these cascading questions, it's going to be very difficult to juggle. And while I do like the setup, I'm not going to say that makes this a good episode that they set it up until I see if they are able to actually do something good with the setup.
I understand. That's totally fair. There are cascading questions. I'm just kind of at this point, I'm like, you know what? If they give us good answers, great. If they don't, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I still trust Stephen Moffat to answer well, even though that Tesselecta thing...
Yeah, that has kind of shaken my faith. And also, people need to stop acting like... And this is... especially on Reddit and a lot of the other forums I've frequented, people are acting like Stephen Moffat is a mad genius. And while he does write a lot of very good stories and he's very creative with time, people are building him up way too much and expecting way too much from cliffhangers and twists from him. Yeah, and they're looking way too much for that when I don't think that's what he's trying to do. And people are... This isn't something I've ever really felt like. I don't think he's a genius. I think he's a very good writer. I don't think he's like the best thing to ever happen to Doctor Who.
I think in the modern era he is, but
I think on average, he's better than Russell T Davies. Yes, I do think that. I think Russell T Davies, like this season particularly, has kind of shaken my faith because he didn't season 31 was really, really great and very, very tight, and this one kind of loosened up, and so there's not.
Well, then
he's not like, and people are just acting like he's infallible and that he's the greatest thing.
I
ever.
don't think he's infallible,
Yeah.
but I'm also not going to say my respect for him as a writer has been lessened by anything that happened this season.
A little
He
bit
is
with the
allowed-
Tessellate thing.
A little
with-
bit, but that's one moment. I don't care too much.
But that one,
It
it's
was,
such a
but I
big
agree.
cop
I
out
agree.
for like the
I
crux of
agree.
the entire season.
I agree, but you know what? With the amount of brilliant stuff he's given us, he's allowed to fuck up once in a while. Russell T Davies never wrote a satisfying finale, except maybe Eccleston's last episode.
Eccleston's last one.
And maybe David Tennant's last episode, although the first part of that is terrible. You know,
It's important to remember that a lot of people do love the Davis years a lot because they are very different, and I
know.
I have a lot of respect for them.
That's where I started, and I like them. But on average, I think the Stephen Moffat stuff is so far and away and above that to me. The consistency too. I think Stephen Moffat demands and gets a better consistency out of his writing staff. That's the other thing for me. But anyway, I think this is a good transition into our talk. What are your overall thoughts on Series 6?
Season 32?
Yes.
I'm
going to go by phrases. Casual listeners will get. You can go by the nerd phrases.
Well, that fits because I've seen 32 seasons. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm going to in a few weeks probably after I give it some more room to breathe and think about it. I'm going to rewatch the entire season like basically back to back over like 2 or 3 days, and so then I'll kind of revisit how I feel about the season as a whole. Overall, I think I like the standalone episodes on average a lot more. I really loved Doctor's Wife. I really loved God Complex. I loved Closing Time. And so I really love those episodes, especially Doctor's Wife. It's so good. But the overall story arcs weren't handled very elegantly, and I think they were too big. They were like, all the stuff with the silence was way too big, and it should have, I think almost like, they should have like done all the silent stuff in like the first 5 episodes and then just done standalone, because it didn't work how they broke it up at all.
I think, I wrote about this in my review, I think Moffat as a writer suffered this year because I think his ambitions were too big.
Yeah,
and for me, I think Wedding of River Song, the last 5 minutes are an acknowledgement of that and saying we're going to change moving forward. My problem is that Moffat
I'm
didn't
still
have...
skeptical because I don't know how far that direction is going to go.
Okay, anyway, but what I was going to say is that Moffat wrote 5 episodes this season, and they all had to be story intensive. And that meant we did not get a Moffat classic. We didn't get a Blink. We didn't get a Big Bang Pandora Opens. We didn't get a Christmas Carol. We didn't get a Silence in the Library, the stuff that he can do really well, because he was too consumed by his own story. And I think that's what happens to showrunners sometimes. And I hope he learns from that, because I think Moffat works best when he can set up and end a story, but also be part of the middle moments.
Yeah.
Because what makes Series 5 work so well is he gets to write the 11th Hour.
Yeah.
He gets to write Big Bang Pandora Opens. Great stories to bookend the season, but he also gets to go in and do The Beast Below. Brilliant. He gets to do The Time of Angels. Another great episode. And I think he works better when he can break from his own stories and do something, I don't know if standalone is the right word, but just
small,
a regular story.
Because he's thrown, like, the pacing is the thing that's gotten affected the most in the Moffat episodes, because they're all over the place, and some of them are handled a lot better than the other ones were.
Well, and I think from just a pure pacing structure, the Impossible Astronaut 2-parter, because it has 2 hours to breathe, is probably the best at that, but it also has problems in the second hour.
Yeah.
And again, I still liked all his episodes, and I think you did too, with the exception of Wedding of River Song.
Like I'm I'm going to rewatch it and see. Like, I just had so many problems with it structurally in the season that I don't think, because since it's a season finale, it needs to. There's certain things that it needs to do that I don't think it did satisfactorily, and I'll eventually rewatch it without all that weight on it. It might be good as just kind of an episode. Yeah. But working in the season, it just was not a good finale.
Right.
I thought.
So I still have faith in Moffat because I still did really enjoy his hours this year. It just so happens that some of the other writers may have eclipsed him. And you know what? That's good for the show in some sense because you need a deep bench of writers. So I just hope next year, because I do think, and he's even said this in interviews, he wants next year to be standalone oriented. And I trust him because I think Series 5, Series 31 for you, that should be the model of how to do Doctor Who seasons, because it's where you have a through thread. You have this cracks in time thing, but more importantly, it's a season about two characters getting to know each other. And then you can have your big finale and your big beginning, but you can have stuff in the middle, and no matter what you do, it's fair game. I don't consider there to be standalones and arc episodes in season 31.
Yeah,
it's all play, because the main thrust of the season is Amy and the Doctor getting to know each other. Any and all things are fair game. And they did a brilliant job with that. If you push this heavy into story arcs, there's no way you can win structurally.
Yeah, but see, now the problem is that there are so many storylines still, because all the silent stuff is still left hanging.
But here's
none of that
I
has been
think
included.
You could do just a good two-parter out of the blue and handle some of that, I feel. And that would be fine.
But the problem is, will he? See, that's the thing I'm not sure
but
about.
I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt for now. We will cross that bridge when we come to it, and I'm perfectly willing to be harsh on it if it doesn't work. But for now, I'm going to say I love Doctor Who. And overall, let's just get out of the Moffat stuff. As a season, I think Season 6 was a very good, possibly great season of television. In comparison to last year's season, it suffered a little.
Yeah.
But, I have said this many times, I consider Season 31 of Doctor Who, Series 5 for you, those of you following along at home, one of the great TV seasons of all time. That is unbelievably good. You cannot follow an act like that and not have it be at least one step below. And there are legitimate problems in this season that put it that step below, and there's also just that they're coming off a great year, and there's a bit of a sophomore slump. But I still think this was better than any of the Russell T Davies years. I liked every episode to varying degrees. There were 2 I thought were throwaways. They were not bad episodes. So they have now gone for 27 episodes, if you throw the Christmas Carol in there, and not had anything offensive or bad to it. Nothing too objectionable. Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe you think differently about Wedding of River Song, but you again said you were kind of hold judgment on that. So,
it's just like an episode.
Yeah, but so I thought this was a fairly good season, and we pretty much talked about our problems with it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what worked throughout it all, and what I've identified as the thing that makes this a great season of TV is what they did with all the characters and performances.
Yeah.
The writers asked every actor to do more than they had been asked to do before, and they all delivered really, really well. Starting with Karen Gillan as Amy Pond. They really deepened that character this year.
Especially in The Girl Who Waited. She was really good as
playing 2 characters.
Yes, as older Amy and younger
Great
Amy.
makeup in that one too. And
it was better makeup than the end of Harry Potter 7 Part 2, where they're older in that one.
I thought that was fine. You didn't?
They looked the same age except for what's his name?
Ron?
The jackass with the blonde hair.
Oh, Malfoy?
Yeah, he has a mustache now. I thought that was fucking hilarious.
That's
how they made him look older. They just put a mustache on him, which looks so because he's like albino. You don't put a mustache on a fucking
He should have been twisting it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, it was good makeup. But Karen Gillan, she was asked to be funnier than she had been before, and she was very funny in certain episodes.
And also be a lot more. I don't want to necessarily say negative, but there are a lot of ugly character aspects, especially in Rebel Flesh and in The Girl Who Waited.
Right.
That she wasn't a perfect person. They definitely showed her more selfish side, the more almost kind of racist-y side with the Rebel Flesh, how she was you're the Flesh Doctor, you're not real.
Yeah. So, and it was a brave performance. That's what I would say about it.
I really liked Amy this year.
And Rory, even more impressive because he's basically coming in mid-run to be a new companion. And, I mean, we saw him last year, but he didn't get to do nearly this much. And everybody loves Rory at this point.
I don't even know what it is, because he usually doesn't have all that much to do in the episodes. Yeah. I don't know what the fuck it is that Arthur Darvill does, but
he just has
it's just fun. He's just fun to watch.
I think he will have a real career.
Yeah, I think
he's a charisma that you can't deny.
Rory is the most relatable companion there's been on the history of Doctor Who. It's everyone knows Rory. Well, everyone's met Rory in their life.
And here's what...
And he's just such a nice guy, too.
Yeah. I don't think they could have done another season of just the Doctor and Amy going around, but if you have Rory in there to balance out these...
it up a lot,
to balance out these 2 crazy people, and they are crazy people, it was really good. This is what I said about Alex Kingston in my review, is that she was asked to go deeper and darker with River than ever before.
She did really good, especially in Let's Kill Hitler.
What I was going to say is, and then in Let's Kill Hitler, they asked her to just reinvent the character wholesale.
And just go insane.
And she's great. Alex Kingston is a really great actress, and she had so much fun this year with the character. And I hope we see her moving forward a couple of times.
Yeah, I hope there's just a little bit more River Song and then like kind of end it eventually. Because we've like.
I thought here's the other thing. We're talking about answers or something in the Wedding of River Song. They filled in most of the gaps in the River Doctor timeline, and I liked that. They filled in the wedding thing. They filled in when she was his companion. Now we know while she's in prison, she travels with him at night. Yeah. I liked that idea, and I also like that we have a definitive answer about the imprisoning. That she's there to help the Doctor maintain his cover, which is a nice thing that they're sharing, and I like that idea. So, she's. Who did anyone think, or in the production staff at least, the audience definitely thought, but when they made the Silence in the Library two-parter, that they had this kind of character on their hands. That's just crazy. Yeah. Stephen Moffat has said she was written as a one-off character, and she just exploded into this new creation.
Basically the crux of this whole season. Yeah. Like, if there's one thing that really ties it together, it's River.
Yeah. But I think the MVP of this season, no questions asked.
As with most seasons of Doctor Who.
Right. But even more so this year because of what the crazy shit he did was Matt Smith. Did anybody think that he could do anything more than what he did in season 31? It's like, how could you impress more than that? Well, he came back for this year and impressed more with every fucking episode. You were talking about the two kind of different Doctors in Impossible Astronaut.
Yeah.
That's great. The little moment where he's dying. That's great. In Curse of the Black Spot, he elevates some weak material. Doctor's Wife.
Fucking phenomenal.
Yeah. Just everything in that was great. The Rebel Flesh two-parter, he gets to play two doctors and have fun doing that, and it's really great. Good Man Goes to War, the scene where he's surveying the battle, or the Colonel Runaway scene, or any one of 100 scenes in that episode. Let's Kill Hitler. Really, he drove the drama of that episode fantastically and delivered one of the better Doctor Who puns, I think, because he does it with class while wearing a tuxedo. And just going through the rest of them, Night Terrors, really good as the you said psychiatrist kind of thing in that episode. The Girl Who Waited, his sort of self-loathing at the very end of that one. God Complex ran the entire gamut of emotions in that one. Closing Time was a brilliant comedic and reflective performance, and then in Wedding of River Song, he commands the screen.
He was the best part of the episode, bar none.
And I felt like that about most episodes. They threw at, it's like every week was them in the writer's room saying, how can we challenge Matt Smith this week? And they're like, well, we'll do this. Like, no one could pull that off. And then he'll go and pull it off and be like, what have you got for me now? And I watch a lot of TV. I've seen what critics call all the best performances. You've got Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul on Breaking Bad. The entire cast of Mad Men, including John Hamm and maybe Elizabeth Moss. That wasn't on TV this year, but still. And then I think Amy Poehler in Parks and Rec. I'm just listing some of the best performances on TV right now. Mm-hmm. I strongly believe Matt Smith is giving the best performance on TV, at least in 2011. And on a family sci-fi show from England. That's,
Well, it's fucking Doctor Who.
Yeah. I'm just saying, a show with relatively humble origins when you think back to 1963, how it started.
They had no idea it was going to...
And now you've got a show that is generating some of the most daring storytelling on TV, the best performance on TV, the best fucking production values.
Oh, easily. Like the best music, the best cinematography, the best effects.
Yeah. We've talked about this a little bit, but the fucking production values this year blew my mind. Because I know they were working on a cut budget in Series 31. I assume they restored that this year. Because every episode this year, with the exception of a few, looked like a movie. You could put those on the big screen, you would have no clue that's a TV show. So.
Yep.
I mean, visually, The Doctor's Wife is the best one, but Impossible Astronaut looked beautiful.
I really liked The Girl Who Waited. At it almost kind of, a lot of it kind of looked like, almost kind of like Portal or like 2001. Yes. We've got like these very like stark white hallways and like this kind of like grungier side to it too.
Right. I was kind of describing it as the most expensive bottle episode ever made because it's just the three main actors. They didn't hire anyone else, but they still had to build all these elaborate sets and stuff. So, do you have any other thoughts on this season?
As far as like going for like the setup for the next season, like with the kind of bringing it back, I think that is kind of interesting because that's how classic Doctor Who operated. There was never there wasn't a moment in classic Doctor Who where Tom Baker was like, I'm the Doctor and I've saved 1 billion people across 1 billion galaxies and you'll do what I say, which is kind of like, what David Tennant would do all the time. Matt Smith has done it a lot. It's interesting that they're trying to bring it back to that. I'm not sure if that's necessarily a good thing. Like, usually I would say, yeah, let's bring it back to the classic Doctor Who. I'm not sure if it needs to, because I've always thought it was interesting and necessary how the new show has approached the Doctor as a character, in that it's a much more modernistic, almost postmodern approach to, basically, who's almost like Superman at this point. Like, he's lived for thousands, I think he's probably lived for at least 1,000 years before I've never been in this 11th generation. And so he's like this very old character who's saved all these people, done all this stuff across the universe. What would he be like now? How would the universe see him now, after all this time, and with all the stuff with the Time War? And so I am interested to see how they approach trying to bring it back to basics, because I'm not sure how this is going to work with how they've done it so far. And it will be interesting. I'm not saying it's going to be bad. I'm just curious to see how that's going to work.
And my thoughts on that are that I've loved all the speeches, particularly in the Moffat era, because Matt Smith is really good at delivering those. Moffat's really good at writing those. But I like that the show is reinventing itself before it necessarily needs to. I think they could have continued on that trajectory and they would have been fine. But I like the idea of let's shake things up, because that's, better. You don't want to be too late on that. If you get to a point where it is tired. And maybe they're thinking, you know what, maybe in the writer's room, because we don't have that perspective, they're saying, we need something new. But
the thing is, they've dialed, actually, Stephen Moffat's really the one who he keeps on doing it more and more, but a lot of, I don't think in any of the other episodes this season, aside from some of the Moffat ones, that the Doctor ever did that, where he had that moment where, I'm the Doctor, I'm the greatest person ever.
There is a great scene in Doctor's Wife, though, where he says, the house says, I've killed thousands of Time Lords. I've killed all of them.
Yeah, that's one of the lines where I can see all the different Doctors saying the line, and they all say it a different way. But they've dialed back. I'm just curious how they're going to approach it as a big plot point, instead of just, because I thought they have kind of done that more subtly, just in that they haven't really, because they don't need to bring it up all the time in the writing. So I'm just curious to see how that approach is going to work.
Here's another thing I wanted to ask you. I really liked this year how they, in terms of classic Doctor Who, they really got away from Earth-based contemporary stories. There was only 2, I guess, Closing Time also. Otherwise, they were away from Earth for most of it. They were on really fantastic adventures all over the place. It felt like something different and new every week. Very different than the Russell T Davies era, and even season 31 fell back on that a couple times in a good way. Just they did it well, but that made it feel a little bit more like classic Who. They barely used the sonic screwdriver, except
I did appreciate that, because I was almost hoping for a more direct throwback to the 5th Doctor era, where he actually loses his sonic screwdriver.
And they may as well this year. He brought it out. Closing Time was by far its most prominent use. And he didn't even use it much there.
Yeah, I do like that they've been dialing back the sonic screwdriver, because it's almost like history repeating itself, because it's like it did the exact same thing. It's like they use it a little bit, use it a little bit, use it a little bit more, use it a little bit more, use it all the fucking time, and then let's stop using it all the time.
Use it to open the Pandorica. Yeah. That's when you have to retire it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that's pretty ridiculous. Let's stop.
Because I love the Pandorica opens and everything, but once you've done that with the sonic screwdriver, the only way to make that moment still resonate is to stop using it after that. So, Murray Gold's music, fan-fucking-tastic this year.
The best. I mean, I don't watch a lot of modern television, but from what I've seen, that's easily the best I've seen. Like you were saying, the music from Lost.
I like that more because I love how Michael Giacchino over 6 years wrote God knows how many motifs and themes, dozens and dozens and dozens, and developed them and made new ones for 6 years. And that is, in the world of composition for film and television, unprecedented. But Murray Gold,
because he's kind of done the same thing. There are a lot of themes. I mean, each season has had a different kind of feel to it. A large part because of the 3rd series in the Modern Who with the Master and stuff. That whole thing. The only my immediate impression of that is I just hear the music from that episode.
Yeah. But keep in mind the symphonic stuff in Doctor Who, because Murray Gold's music actually doesn't get really symphonic until season 2. Mm-hmm. In the first season, it's still somewhat electric. and then synthesized. That would have still been 3 seasons into Lost. I do feel Michael Giacchino influenced this at least a little bit because Giacchino did set a precedent, at least in American television, of bringing back a symphony orchestra. That was
I haven't watched all of Lost, but from what I have watched, I did notice the music was very well done.
Yeah. But anyway, no, I mean, that doesn't take anything away from Doctor Who. Beautiful music on Doctor Who, and it's like he gets better every year. I would have to listen to the Season 6 soundtrack and compare it to Season 5 to see if I liked it better, but man, every episode in my notes, for every single episode, I wrote down music, because it was great every time. And I love how he can mix it up and make it sound like a different, unique score in every adventure, but still make it sound like Doctor Who, keep in the 11th Doctor theme, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So, I can't wait for I'm more excited for the Season 6 soundtrack than, like, the DVD set. So, yeah. Are you sad they canceled Doctor Who Confidential?
Like, I never usually watch. I mean, the only one that I ever thought was actually really interesting was the Neil Gaiman one, because
I've always thought they were
interesting stuff with it.
I've always thought they were overlong, and I like the cut down versions on the DVDs way more. But I think it's a little sad only in the concept that was making Doctor Who by far the most well documented show on television, and that's going to be sad that they won't have that. I wish they would bring it back as like a 10-15 minute thing.
Or just, like, you do something with it kind of like on the DVDs or something. Yeah. Like it doesn't bother me that much, but...
Okay. Well, do we have anything more to say about Series 6?
I really like Doctor Who.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a good time for Doctor Who. We can have individual problems with different things, but this is a show on its 32nd season, and it is this good. What the fuck?
It's fucking Doctor Who, dude.
Yeah. I'm just saying, no show has reached that length, so there's literally no precedent, but there's no competition for that. Simpsons one day may... It's already lost that title, though.
Yeah, no.
Simpsons in the last few years has been very good. Last Sunday's episode was very funny.
I don't watch the Simpsons that much anymore.
I don't either. When I turn on, I think they're better than they were in, like, the mid-teens seasons.
I mean, I never watched Simpsons as seasonally anyways.
Right.
Like, I've only ever seen it in syndication.
Yeah.
So
Simpsons isn't... Best Doctor Who. It's good.
Yeah. There are a lot of there's not a lot, but I've definitely noticed the last few episodes I've seen of Simpsons. There have been Doctor Who references. Pretty sure Matt Groening is a Doctor Who fan, because especially Tom Baker.
He
pops up.
On the season premiere of NBC's Community, there was a fantastic Doctor Who joke.
The Inspector Space-Time thing?
Yes.
I've heard of, I've seen references to it on the internet, but I don't watch Community.
I'll show you the clip maybe. But it's so... Abed, who is this character who's obsessed with TV and stuff, is really sad because his favorite American show, Cougar Town, has been pushed to mid-season. And so it's a long series of steps where his friend shows him first the British show Cougar Town is based on, and this is all false, but called Cougarton Abbey. And then which is really fun.
Cougarton Abbey.
And he's disappointed because it's only 6 episodes long and ends with all the characters committing suicide. And then she feels bad, so she introduces him like, this show's been on the air for 50 years. And it's Inspector Space-Time, and he gets out of one of those red phone booths. And he looks like basically Inspector Gadget with this trench coat and stuff, and a magnifying. It's very funny. And they're on like a desert planet, and there's Kalex instead of Daleks, and Abed says, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life," and it's a fun moment. But yeah, Inspector Spacetime podcast.
Okay.
No, this has been your Doctor Who podcast. I mean, monthly 10 for the month of October 2011. We'll be back next month with an actual top 10 list, maybe.
Okay.
You okay? Unless there's something Doctor Who related to talk about, because
this is all. It's 32 fucking seasons. There's something Doctor Who related we could talk about if we wanted to that we haven't even addressed yet.
I know. We could.
We could like make a top 10 breaking the fourth wall Doctor Who jokes that have been on the show, if we wanted to.
Could that sustain?
We could do a top 20 list of those.
Could that sustain a 3-hour podcast?
Probably. It would be a very angry one. I really fucking hate it when they do that.
Okay. Well, on that note. I'm going to go ahead and play us out.